This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakeland.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Ross Watson in the third chair. With contribution from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of an iconoclast cruiser dedicated to corn, smashing through a warp storm at full speed. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our fine patrons over at Patreon, continuing to smash records and impel us faster and farther than ever before. And tonight we're going to thank Josh Neal, Cameron Axe, Richard Reed, and Tim Reinhardt. Richard Reed. Anyway, I'm Geekling Nerd, your host today. Our panelists are Russ, Red Tooth Wakeland, and special guest Ross, Master of the Lore Watson, the Guru of Grimdark, the Magnar of the Imperium, and Master of the Empire of Man. Let's begin. Woo. Issue number 1. Logistics is the management of the flow of things between the point of origin and the point of consumption in order to meet requirements of customers, corporations, or raging military formations. Logistics is the boring and mundane foundation upon which all great military campaigns is forged. Question. Military logistics is the discipline of planning and carrying out the movement and maintenance of military forces. How many facets do authorities consider essential to military logistics? Anchor moving Ross.
3 facets, sir.
Freight pros Ross.
I will say 5.
8 facets to military logistics: design, development, acquisition, storage, distribution, maintenance, evacuation, and or disposition, which I think is what we all think of anyway.
And over engineering.
It's ridiculous. Issue number 2. Although there are many writers who pump out a great deal of work in a short period of time, George R.R. Martin, we are not looking at you. Few of them rise to the level of the great masters of history, some of whom have been known to pump out novels as quickly as one a month. In the end, it is not the quantity of the body of work you leave behind, but the quality. However, as Joseph Stalin once said, quantity has a quality all its own. Question. Brazilian surgeon turned pulp action writer Ryoki Inoue holds the Guinness Book of World Records record as the world's most prolific writer. In the span of just 6 years, how many novels did this paragon produce? And Roberts Russ.
I'm going to go with 23.
And Jorga Ross.
I'm going to say 60.
1,000.
What?
Wow.
He wrote 1,000 novels in 6 years under more than 30 pseudonyms. That's just ridiculous. But hold on, there's more. Issue number 3. In addition to the mere quantity of a writer's work, the breadth of topics discussed is also key to judging their value to their chosen genre. A man who can write well in one universe might be gifted, but one who writes in countless modes is a treasure. Question. Isaac Asimov is famous, of course, for his science fiction works. However, he was known to write books on all sorts of different topics, never limiting himself to a single narrow field. How many of the 10 Dewey Decimal categories did Isaac Asimov apply his prodigious brain over the course of his career? Rochelle of Y. Wakeland.
I'm going to go with 8.
Prince Regent Venus Watson.
I know he did mystery, so I'm going to say 10.
It was 9. Mystery, first of all, is not one of those categories. 9
Oh,
of the 10. He wrote at least 2 books in every other category but philosophy, where he did write the foreword to a book, The Humanist Way, thus at least putting his name in all 10 categories of the Dewey Decimal System, which is ridiculous. Issue number 4. In many games that apply strategic and logistical as well as tactical decision-making to the pursuit of success, one must be sure to analyze every possible course of action, not only of oneself, but also of all of his or her opponents as well, lest they find themselves on the verge of some great complex success, only to be crushed by the brutal hammer of an opponent coming in at an oblique angle. Question. On a scale of 1 through 10, with 1 being an untimely coin drop, and 10 being that feeling one gets when one realizes that there is no more paper in the public stall, how frustrating is it when on the cusp of greatness, one's strategic board game scheme comes crashing to a halt? Slow Wi-Fi Wakeland.
It's proportional to the duration of the game, but I'm going to go with 8.7.
Doctor's office waiting Watson.
I don't think it can be measured. Limitless.
Ah, my friends. A 1, of course. If you're not ready to deal with such setbacks, why are you playing a strategic board game in the first place? Really, what kind of loser gets upset at a moment like that? I don't know. Certainly not. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for listening and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by
Battle Foam, protecting your army so you don't have to.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more.
Hello!
Hello!
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 173 of the D6 Generation. I'm Russ Wakeland.
I'm Craig Gallant.
And I'm Ross, Orctimus Prime Watson.
Orctimus Prime.
Prime.
I love it. Mr. Watson, welcome back to the show, sir. It's been too long.
Thank you. You know, I love coming back to the show. I can't tell you how often I've thought, man, I should get back on the show.
You should.
So.
You should. Don't be a stranger. So long-time listeners know Ross has been on the show, more than a few times, which is excellent. But it has been a little bit of I would say we've had a Ross dearth, which we need to correct immediately. So later this episode, we're going to catch up. We have called this segment appropriately, I think, Craig, Rappin' with Ross.
I think you called it rapping.
Yes, it's both witty and brief.
Long-time listeners will know that Russ has a particular affinity for
Alliteration.
alliteration.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is the word you're looking for. So yes, so we'll be chatting with Ross, what he's been up to. It's fascinating and very exciting. So we want to talk about all that. And of course, later, since we do have the one of the masters of Grimdark himself, Ross Watson, on the show, we wanted to talk a bit about the new game Forbidden Stars, give it a full D6G review, and get Ross's thoughts on it as well. So if you're a fan of 40K, like I am, at least Universe, it'd be great to talk more about that later. But first, Craig, we do have a contest that just wrapped up.
It does. We do. Yes, what you said.
Yes, it just wrapped up. This is the one that was very brief, very short. It was just for the month of August. It is now done, and it was the chance to win big cash prizes from our friends at the Dice Tower. So we'll get you back the details on the winners either the end of this episode when I get them from Tom, or shortly thereafter in the following episode. So more about that later.
Indeed.
But first, Craig, before we get to all the other business, we should talk about the lost chapters. And I know we spotted Ross in Dunkin' Donuts. Do you remember that?
We did. I remember it distinctly. He had smuggled in several different non-Dunkin' Donuts baked items, I believe.
I know. And then the guy chased us out, and it was very awkward.
It got very violent.
So Ross, do you remember what we talked about in Dunkin' Donuts?
Yeah, we talked about one-off RPGs and basically advice on how to run them.
Yeah, that was fun. And this is just sort of like if you're going to run something at a convention or just a one-off night at home or whatever, what do you do? But we did spend a lot of time talking about how you interact with players you don't know well, which is kind of a neat thing to try with an RPG. So yeah, if you're interested in that, check that episode out. Craig, if people want to listen to the Lost Chapters, and they're finding them fascinating, they saw that one we did about Halo, they saw that one we did about whatever other hotness is going by, and they don't want to wait for the full review and they want to hear it now, how do they go about doing that, Craig?
Well, really, the best way for them to do that, Russ, is the best way for us. And that is for them to become a patron over at Patreon. For becoming a patron over at Patreon, first you go to Patreon, you find the D6 Generation super easy. And the way Patreon works is basically you're giving a little tip to each show that we put out. So you might give 25 cents, you might give 50 cents. There's a few of those. You might give $2 a show. And at $2 a show and up, you actually get access to all of the lost chapters for no further cost. So basically we've moved everything over to this Patreon process where everybody sort of gives what they think we deserve, what they can afford to give. You don't have to give anything. The vast majority of listeners don't, which is fine. That's the model that we've chosen. But if you do, and you go for $2 or more per episode, you'll get access to all of these 45 minutes or more sometimes of extra material of all kinds of inane nonsense.
That's exactly right. Now, one other thing, now that Gen Con is over, Craig.
Yes.
And our attention must turn away from the awesomeness that is the summer con season.
Yes, indeed. It is over.
And now we must turn to one of my favorite events of all of the fall.
Uh-oh.
Which is how we play games for charity. And that, of course,
yes,
is Extra Life coming this fall. And we've already got our Extra Life pages up. Craig, how should people go to there to support us?
I don't know, Russ. I don't know how people should go. Why don't you tell me how they
what
should
they
go?
should do is
that way in the future I can tell them where
they should go to extra-life.org. Okay? When you go there, you will see a website all about Extra Life, which, of course, is the great charitable event that was started by video gamers. Actually, the Sarcastic Gamer podcast started it. And now it is extended over the years to cover a broad breadth of gaming, video games, board games, RPGs, you name it. Basically, on November 7th, we'll all do any kind of gaming we want for 24 hours straight. It's kind of like a walkathon, but with video games. And we ask folks to sponsor us and pledge a certain amount of money per hour we do it for us and help us out. And all this money goes to children's hospitals around the world. But the best part is those who participate pick their favorite local children's hospital to support. And of course, Craig and I have chosen Boston Children's Hospital. Both of us have personal experience there. It's a great organization. Literally saved my daughter's life. And so I am very passionate about this. It's a very exciting way that we as gamers and literally millions of dollars have been raised. And my favorite part about Extra Life is that all of that money, 100% of it, goes to the various children's hospitals around the world. So great way to do it. You can support a variety of ways. One, you can go there, search for the D6 generation. You'll see our team, and you'll see the various people registered, including Craig and myself. You can pledge to support one of us, whichever one of us you think is cooler. Then also you can,
Nice.
or let's say, for example, you'd rather participate, actually join in. You can do that too and sign up under the D6 generation team. And let's see how much money as a group we can all
want
raise.
to have a huge team that is wildly successful. That we're going to gauge our success this year on how much our team makes.
Right. So it's less important how much we raise individually and more important how much our team raised. For example, we've already had Jeremy join our team, and he's already raised more money than us, Craig.
Well,
Go, Jeremy. That's awesome.
Which
Do it,
Jeremy?
Man. Jeremy Haugen.
Oh, Jeremy, well done.
So well done, Jeremy. Thank you for joining our team, and thank you for already working hard to raise that money. So great job. So please help out. It's for the children, literally. And I love their slogan, play games, heal kids. Good stuff.
That's right.
But now, what's it time for, Craig?
Oh, geez. Well, you're throwing it to me. Could be almost anything. Probably has something to do with achievements in gaming.
It is time for achievements in gaming. Oh,
That's
no, my
just a
achievement
guess.
noise. Okay, so here's a fly. I've upgraded to Windows 10.
Uh-oh.
It's working. No, it's working great, except my OneDrive box is not fully synced, so my achievement noise is missing. So this is very awkward. I'm not going to lie. So I'll make a manual achievement noise. Ready? Bloop, bloop. There we go.
On a
Okay.
scale of 1 through 10, with 1 being a dropped coin. No, never mind.
All right, here we go. So, all right, so let's start with our guest first, Ross. What have you been playing lately?
Well, I've been playing a lot of Savage Rifts lately. We've been getting that game ready to go for early next year. So we've been trying out the Glitter Boys and the Juicers and the Bursters and
Nice.
adventuring through the Rifts Earth area quite a bit. On top of that, there is a board game that you guys really should check out. It's pretty awesome. It's called The Captain is Dead.
Oh, I thought this was a card game. It's a
We
full-on
have
board
heard
game?
so much about this lately.
So it's a full-on board game, Ross?
Yeah, it's a board game.
Oh, cool.
It's got cards in it.
Okay.
But it's a co-op game where we're all playing as members of the crew of a starship, which is under attack by aliens. There's all kinds of stuff offline, and the captain is dead, which is the name of the game. So, like Russ would be the security officer, and Craig would be the science guy, and I might be the engineer, and we're all doing different things to try to get the ship back online and ready to warp out of the area before we get blown up. It's really fun.
Nice. It looks cool. I'm looking at it now. I really like the artwork. It's very cool looking. Very neat. I'll have to check that one out.
Let's see. On top of that, you guys recently talked about D&D 5th Edition.
Yes.
Or D&D Next. And I have been playing quite a bit of that. I have a home group here where I run Birthright for them, which is a setting from 2nd Edition back in the day. It's very political, epic fantasy with a low magic feel. And we've been playing that on and off for over a year now, which is pretty awesome. Not too many campaigns get to pass the year mark.
Yeah, right. That's very cool.
And on top of that, there's a couple conventions that we've had recently where I do some one-shots, which we talk about in our last chapter. And when I run these one-shots, what I do is I do Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition for the animated series, the cartoon that came out in 1983. So you get to play as Sheila, Bobby, Hank, Eric and Diana, and it's just a lot of fun.
You get to say, and I'm the dungeon master.
Yeah, I totally do. We encourage
Your
that game
guide to the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
I encourage that game to feel as much like an episode of the show as I possibly can. I play the opening scene, I play the ending scene, I get everybody to say Dungeon Master whenever Dungeon Master appears. Super fun.
Do you have a figure for Dungeon Master? Does he actually show up on the board?
You know, funnily enough, I don't often use miniatures in one-shots. I tend to kind of go with the theater of the mind. Mm-hmm. So I'm not using miniatures on that one. Although if I ever found a nice set of miniatures for the kids in Venger, I would probably use it.
I think you have to.
Cool.
Cool. And does Tiamat show up also? It feels like she needs to.
Oh, you know, I do it with Venger because I think he's got a more interesting story. Although I think if I do another session of it, like if I do another story, I would like to do it with the Dragon's Graveyard and Tiamat and stuff like that.
It'd be kind of fun to kind of tie it into Horde of the Dragon Queen and kind of make it like that.
That would be kind of cool. Lastly, we played some Deadlands here at a convention in town called Myths and Legends Con, and it was really fun to get back to the whole undead cowboys and monsters in the Wild West thing. I know Craig would have probably just ate it up with a spoon because it was really fun. So that's pretty much what I've been playing lately in terms of those kinds of games.
Nice. Very good.
Love me my Deadlands.
How about you, Craig?
How about me? Well, for me, I would say I've been doing a lot of Frostgrave. Did 2 more games of Frostgrave, one with Russ and one with Rafe. So that's kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. How did it go? So I know our game went, but how did you? How did you like the different games?
I'm gonna fall back again on my. I wish the missions had more diversity. Mm-hmm. The missions are all grab the treasure and run, which is kind of like the theme of the universe that they've created. So you're all kind of raiding this city that's slowly thawing out, and it's filled with treasure. So you're going to go in and you get treasure. But I would like to see, and I'm sure there will be more diversity. There's a whole campaign book coming out later in the early fall, I believe, that's all about a lich lord that is thawing out and starts to wreak havoc on the city. But it's still a lot of fun. I love my terrain. I love getting that terrain out. I'm still churning terrain out for it. I've got several different war bands that I've already put together. Warband generation is simple for most of the warband, but more complex and a lot of fun, I think, for the wizard that you're putting together. So basically the concept is that it's a wizard and his apprentice and then a bunch of hired hands going in to look for the treasure. So the hired hands don't have a lot of individuality, but the wizard, the apprentice is basically the wizard with junior stats. And then you've got the wizard who chooses the way you choose spells. There's like 80 spells in the book to choose from. And it's a very cool way that they've done that. And then seeing how that plays out. And in one game, you might not use any of this kind of spell. And then in the next game, you might be in a position where you're going to need these spells that you didn't use last time. You've got 8 spells off the bat. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. And I really thought I had Rafe, and then he snagged the last treasure and spelled the guy off the board in the very last turn for a tie. So it was a lot of fun.
Now, how did Rafe like it? Because it's got a little bit of a. I actually really enjoy it. I like the mechanics of it. It's a little luck swingy, but that's okay because that's the kind of game it is, which is fine. But did Rafe like that? I couldn't tell if he was digging that or if he felt it was even too lucky.
No, he liked it a lot. He felt it was a little swingy also. The thing is, though, when you take 3, as an example from 40K or old fantasy, 3 die rolls to see if you've killed a guy, and in Frostgrave, that's 1 opposed die roll.
Right.
So it's going to seem like it's. The more I think about the whole swingy element of it, I think occasionally you're going to kill the Terminator like with 1 shot of a lasgun, right?
Right.
And so occasionally that's going to happen. I mean, I think it is swingy, and the mechanisms of the game make it seem even more swingy. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's as swingy as it feels because of the way that all those die rolls have been condensed down into 1 opposed die roll, which usually works out great.
This seems an awful lot like Mordheim.
That is the comparison that is most often made. It has a whole campaign system in it, which sadly I think not as much thought went into the campaign system. So it's got in my opinion, it has to be. There's a bunch of house rules that'll have to come into play, but I think it's got a lot of potential.
I would say
but it's got all the same, like, oh, you killed my guy. Oh, he's not dead. Oh, he got his leg chopped off kind of stuff. Just like right out of Mordheim, except that it's only the wizard and the apprentice that have to track those sorts of things. The hired hands, again, are, they're either dead or they're
a dime
alive.
a dozen, just hire more.
They're expendable.
Yeah, exactly. They're dirty, filthy mercenaries.
I would say, Ross,
Nice.
that the game, the core mechanics are stronger than Mordheim.
Okay.
Because Mordheim is kind of swingy too, in a way that, and so is Necromunda in a way that, you shoot the guy, then you roll to see if he's dead or just, stunned or whatever. This feels a little more, to Craig's point, I think the way they condense the rolls down, it actually feels really nice. I think where it feels swingy, I think, to us War Machine players is there's no way to mitigate the luck, right? So if I roll a 1 on my D20 and Craig rolls a 20, it's over, right? So like that's the kind of and that could be my wizard who's my main dude, right? So I don't lose the game when that happens, but I've suddenly lost. It's like getting your land raider shot with a las cannon in turn 1 and dying, and you're like, oh.
Right.
Yeah.
So that can happen.
The minis are cool.
But the minis are cool, and the coolest part of it is that I like a lot is you handcraft your heroes, right? So it's kind of like picking your favorite war gear in 40K or fantasy, where you but in this case you're building your wizard spells exactly. So Craig actually ran a bunch of his Khador guys, and
Rafe
Craig
does not own any Khador
Rafe
guys.
ran all his Khador guys, but tweaked the rules and then had like Kruger from the Circle leading them to models. But then he created a set of spells for Kruger that kind of emulated the fact that it was Kruger. So you could pick your favorite D&D character or all those Reaper miniatures you got lying around and kind of make them work the way you'd expect. And from that point of view, it's a great rule set to just grab your favorite models and get them on the table and have some fun.
Yeah. The other comparison that's most often used is Gut Shot, which of course didn't end up as a big success elsewhere, but is still remembered very fondly locally.
Brimstone.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's the same kind of like fast and loose RPG feely kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember what else. I was going to make a comparison where that would actually be more important, but I can't remember what it was. So anyway, I enjoyed it. Moving on, because I can't remember what I was going to say. I played Wrath of Dragons with Russ because he made me. Because he offered me the place in his game. And I remember not liking it, but now I can't remember why I didn't like it.
Because it has a Euro mechanic.
It's a Euro game, that's right.
But it's a Euro game where you're playing dragons.
It did the theme fantastically. The theme was extremely well done. I enjoyed the idea of the theme. I mean, in retrospect, I think I enjoyed it more than I thought I was enjoying it when I played it.
See?
Then Russ left.
I did.
And the board game meetup crew from Concord that is now melded into our group, or I should actually say, because I feel like it's more of a 50-50 way. It's not like we've absorbed them or they've absorbed us. It's more like our two groups are meeting simultaneously at the
more
same
the merrier,
place.
that's what I say.
And yeah, exactly. One of those guys had a game that he had been given at Gen Con that's not yet available, Mafia de Cuba.
Ooh.
And Are You the Traitor is all I can say.
Oh.
It's much more impressive components. It's basically you're the mafia. I don't know how Cuba comes into it, but you're one person plays the Godfather, and then there's there's cigars from Cuba. That must be it. Anyway, there's a cigar box, and the cigar box has 15 diamonds and a certain number of poker chips. Depending upon how many players you've got, and it plays like some crazy number, like Werewolf or any of those games. And the poker chips are roles that you're playing. So it might be the driver, and the driver wins if the guy to his right wins. And it might be the henchman, and the henchman wins if the Godfather wins, and one of them is the FBI agent, and the FBI agent wins if he manages to do this, that. So it's one of those role games. But what happens is the box goes around the whole circle once, and you open it secretly, and you can take out any number of diamonds or a chip that tells you what your role is going to be. And then it goes around. There's a couple things that I'm skipping over, but this is the basics. And then eventually it gets back to the Godfather, and he opens it, and he sees how many of his diamonds have been stolen, and he now has to go around and he has to start eliminating people. And if he accuses you of being a thief and you have the diamonds, then you die and you can't win. If he accuses the FBI guy dies. So the FBI guy is trying to seem loyal, but it doesn't have, or at least in this one example play that I had late at night, it suffered from that same thing that Are You the Traitor, which is there's no real guidance as to what your dialogue is supposed to be. So it was just like, and it didn't help that the poor kid who was the godfather was like he was Adam's brother or stepbrother. He was like 15 years old, surrounded by a bunch of older guys, one of whom had been drinking heavily all night long, clearly. And it was like, so I don't know what he should have done or could have done. It was more a case of, like, there's one mechanism that was totally messed up by Dave, because it was again explained on the fly. We both thought it worked one way, but it didn't. And I was counting the diamonds, and then to prove that I was loyal, I was like, hey, I know that there were 8 diamonds in there. And the guy next to me was like, no way, dude, there were 9 diamonds. And I was like, no, there were 8. I counted. Little did I know that Dave had hidden one inside the box in this little area that you're not supposed to hide anything in. So I was wrong. And the poor guy who was like, no, it was 9. I'm a henchman too, got shot. So that was kind of funny.
On the day of your daughter's wedding.
Yeah, exactly. I got an offer you can't refuse. So I think it probably. I mean, I'm not saying it was. You Are the Traitor. I think if I got a chance to read the rules, maybe, or if we sat down and actually went through the rules more carefully, I'm sure it would be more than. Are You the Traitor? But that was the kind of the feeling I was left with, which was, kind of like, why did I not leave 15 minutes earlier?
Yes, for those who don't remember, Are You the Traitor, which we did discuss on the show briefly when it first came out, was not well received by this organization.
It was not. It was one of the few negative reviews we have ever given.
Yes, one of the few.
And then I played Forbidden Stars, which I thought was fantastic. It was awesome. I never once got frustrated or angry or upset. That was some other guy.
Yes.
And then at the end of the night, I played New Salem, which was one of the games that Adam brought home from Gen Con, which is another one of these social games where most of the people are Puritans and 1 or 2 of the people are witches, and the witches are trying to hide who they are, and you're doing these things with cards at the same time that are going to be the tiebreakers if the good guys win or the bad guys win. I was the witch. I think I was the only witch in the whole village of 5 people, and I didn't know what was going on, so I just fumbled my way to victory. Because everybody's like, no witch would actually do what Craig just did.
Brilliant.
And the mechanisms of the game sort of, like you're looking at these little white and black cubes. It's goodness and badness slowly building up in Salem. And everybody has no choice but to generate a little bit of each by the cards that they're choosing quickly on the fly. And so it just so happened that they were choosing cards that were generating just enough badness that I won. So that was funny because they finally figured out it was me. I don't like these games where it's relatively easy for you to start peeking at other people's cards. And this game does have that mechanic where you can pay some of your goodness and get rid of it, sort of sacrifice your goodness to look at somebody else's card, which is what they did to me with only 2 rounds left to go. But at that point, just through luck of the draw, there wasn't enough goodness being generated anywhere else for them to pay for the next card they wanted to use, which would have locked me down and removed me from the game. So, that's another one I would like to try with a little more, like we literally whipped that one through in 10 minutes with Nadia going, hey guys, you promised me you're going to get everybody else out on time.
What's the player count on that game? How big does it go?
It had to go pretty high. I mean, they were getting ready to play with 4, or no, they were getting ready to play with 3. We hopped in, so it became 5, and I'm pretty sure it carried up to at least 8.
Oh wow.
I had it actually up on my computer a moment ago. Why don't you move on?
All right.
And wait, I got it. Players 3 to 8.
There you go.
Oh, nice. Who's good? Who's got the skills to pay the bills?
Wow.
Yeah, I said it. I went there.
You did.
I did.
All
right. Those were my games. What about you, Russ?
All right. So, let's see. I played a family game of Fairy Tale Games Battle Royale, which again is the fairy tale game where everybody's stuck in the Hunger Games. Still really enjoying that game as a family. Again, I cannot say the mechanics are the best ever or anything. It's just the theme is fun, and we love the miniatures, and my kids love it, and we have a good time, so there you have it. Wrath of Dragons, I've played that twice now, once with the family. Well, I've actually played it a couple more times than that, but recently I played it twice, once with the family and then again once with the gamer game. Really enjoying that. I think at the table we played it, only Craig was disappointed in it, and that was only because it was Euro. Everybody else really enjoyed it, including Rafe. So I think if you like Euro games, you will enjoy this one. The theme is actually, my favorite part of it is watching the poor humans try to rebuild every 100 years. So you as dragons are, every century you go take a nap. And then you wake up, you decide it's time to remind the humans who's boss, and all of the players as dragons go out and pillage the countryside, destroying cities, villages, eating livestock, etc. And then you go back and take a nap again, and the humans attempt to rebuild their land. It's kind of funny to watch them try to build up. Oh, look at those silly humans built another city. Time to go eat it. Then also played, Dave introduced us to Flick 'em Up, Craig.
You
did not list Flick 'em Up on your list.
I forgot Flick 'em Up. I played Flick 'em Up again as well.
Dexterity cowboy game. Essentially, you are. It's not quite. This is what part of the game I don't get. It's not actually high noon. The game ends at high noon. So apparently, we have decided to start our gun shootout at 6 a.m. and we have 6 hours, I guess, to complete our gunfight, which is quite a long time. And so what's cool about the game, though, is there's all these cool wooden buildings, and one of them is a clock tower, and the clock itself is used to track turns, which is neat. And then you have all these little wooden cowboy meeples with cool hats that reverse to show you who's activated and who hasn't. And then you flick little silver bullets to try to knock over their cowboys and do wounds to them. And in the scenario we played, it was all about just killing everybody, but I think there are other scenarios that are a little more advanced. But it was a lot of fun. Fun little dexterity game. Yeah. Great components. It's funny, so at Gen Con, they had the large version. And when I saw the large version, then saw the actual game, I was disappointed. But then seeing the actual game just by itself, it actually is quite nice.
Yeah, I went through the exact same evolution.
So during the game we played, I was actually like, well, this is a pretty good deal. It is a little pricey. You do get an awesome wooden box. It's a little pricey, but it is all these really cool wooden components. And if it's your kind of thing, I think it's a good one. And I think the kids would love it too.
I agree. And it is pricey. I think you might want to look to Amazon or someplace like that if you're going to get this one, but it's up to you.
So also, as we mentioned earlier, I played Frostgrave with Craig. I already talked about that. Also played Survive Space Attack again with gamers this time at the tavern there. And I have to say, really enjoyed it again and played with old Andy and another new person to the club that I'm forgetting his name now. I want to say Jack or John. I'm forgetting.
Make it up.
I apologize. But both of them really enjoyed it. Both of them had played Survive before, and both of them thought it was an improvement on Survive. They really liked it better. I really enjoy it also, and it's really fun. And we were playing it next to a bunch of other gamers who were playing another game, and they kept coming and looking at the awesome components. So it's hard to beat little wooden turrets that fire lasers and little wooden fighters and spaceships. You put your little astro meeples in. It definitely is a great looking game. It also plays a lot of fun. So if you like good components, fast, simple gameplay that you can easily teach, and a great gateway game that's done a little over an hour, Survive Space Attack.
Yep. It's a lot of fun. Oh, and I would highly recommend people go to the War Store for Flick 'em Up, except that currently it's out of stock.
Well, there you go. And finally, of course, played another game of Forbidden Stars. Really enjoying that. More about that later this very episode as we review it. So, talk about that.
Flick 'em Up is $96 at Amazon.
Yeah.
What? No,
well,
you know why? Because it's out of stock everywhere.
It's hard to get now. It's becoming hard to get. Pretty soon, $100 will look cheap. So get it while it's hot. So modeling. What have you been doing, Ross, for modeling?
Well, I haven't done an awful lot, but recently I did adapt basically one of the old 40K vehicles I had lying around and turned it into a coalition APC for our Savage Rifts game. We needed something to represent the transport that is like a big part of our playtest scenario, where the coalition, which is this human first organization, sort of fascists, right? They're running around trying to conquer a lot of land and so forth. So they're rounding up everybody who looks different from them. All the dimensional beings are DBs, and they put them in the back of the APC. And a big part of the adventure revolves around you guys as heroes trying to stop them and let the prisoners free. So it was important to have this APC done, and it has some cool skulls on it for the coalition. It has a really big fetish for skulls and skeleton-like iconography.
Well, you should fit right in.
Yeah, it wasn't a big stretch, honestly.
Sounds very grimdark.
It does, actually. It does. So that's what I've been up to for modeling.
All right, I'll go next because Craig is going to have an essay. So I didn't do anything on the order of Craig's magnitude, whatever this is this week. I'm sure it's massive. I have done a couple models, but for me, that's a lot. So my youngest daughter does horseback riding. That's her thing. So Thursday night, she goes riding, which means I am left alone with my oldest daughter, Rose. And we have taken up to making Thursday night painting night. So my youngest daughter, just painting's not her thing. She likes gaming, but not painting, so it's just not her thing. But my Rose and I do paint. So what we started doing now is we took a break from our War Machine models because she really wants to paint up this entire set of 41 models that go to this fairy tale game. So she has painted two. She's painted up Morgan Le Fay and Snow White. And by the way, this isn't your mommy's Snow White. Snow White is armed with weapons and she's kicking ass. I have painted up Beast, who looks just like Beauty and the Beast. I've also painted up the Wicked Witch of the West. My favorite part of the Wicked Witch of the West model is she is holding Toto by the scruff of his neck and saying, "I've got your little dog too." Then also, we've primed a bunch more guys for next week. We've got on deck now, we have Rapunzel. I love Rapunzel's model. She has attached daggers to various locks of her hair, and they're all like, somehow she can control her hair, and it's like a giant tangled mess of weaponry. Then also we have Mother Goose, who, again, not your mom's Mother Goose. She looks pretty badass with some kind of fire shooting out of her storybook. I've also painted up Robin Hood, or working on Robin Hood. We've also got the Cowardly Lion from The Wizard of Oz, which looks really evil except for his little bow and his tail, which is hilarious. And then finally, Sherlock Holmes is actually almost ready to go as well. So yeah, lots of cool guys and just a sampling of all the crazy different characters that kind of get combined in this mashup. It's kind of like, who'd win in a fight, except you got all these crazy fairy tale creatures. So it's pretty cool.
Russ.
Yeah.
You should put on the bottom of the Wicked Witch's base, Surrender Dorothy.
I should. That'd be awesome. I may have to hide that there. So Craig, okay, so I painted two models. What do you got?
I don't like the pressure. I have put together and finished my Zvezda 150 scale medieval cog, which is a big boat that people who have followed along for a long time or listened to the Did You Ever Notice from a while back would know that I scratch built half of a ship for my Mordheim board that I made ages ago for Daka and then was lost to the warp. And so I was with my son at the local railroad store about a month ago now, and I saw this ship and I was like, ooh, that would be almost perfect. And then I fell to the weakness and I bought it, despite the fact that it cost way more than I should pay for a piece of terrain. And I painted it up. It's awesome. This one, unlike the other one that I had to cut at the water level, this one came with two, the hull comes in two pieces so you could do a waterline version of it. So it's a big waterline version of an old medieval ship with the castles at the front and the back. And it made for an awesome terrain piece last night in my game with Rafe. Also, I have a little piece of advice, especially now that whatever's happening with Warhammer. Usually you want to avoid those dusty, old, stinky game stores, but the ones that have almost no foot traffic. But those are the ones where these last remaining pieces, especially things like the Warhammer fantasy terrain that no longer is being made because the entire world blew up. These are the stores that will have some of those still in stock, despite the fact that they're skyrocketing on eBay. And so I went in and I found this little tower called the Death Knell Watchtower, which is awesome. If you leave out some of the grimdark, it looks like a really cool fieldstone tower. So I got that, put it together. Sadly, as Russ points out time and time again, neither the ship nor the tower have snow on them.
No,
yet.
they do not. So
Russ denies that they are finished, which is true. True enough, they're not finished. But other than the snow, they're finished, which is cool. I had a whole idea for a waterfront section for my Frostgrave board. So I needed a bridge for that, and the only bridge I could find anywhere was this bridge made by Pegasus that used to be made by Zvezda, I believe. Atelieri, I think. And now it's by Pegasus, made for bolt action. And at the War Store website, it's out of order and has been for a long, long time. But they had 3 of them at Gen Con. So I got one for cheap, and I put that together. And now I have a cool bridge. And it was really easy to paint up. I have, because of the Ironwind Metals booth at Gen Con, going through all those metal bins and all of the bones from my own stuff and from our friend Shifty Will. I have every possible wandering monster that you might encounter in Frostgrave. Most of them are painted. Skeletons. I have a toad. I have boars. Everything that could possibly wander into your game. So that's very cool. It was really fun. I have a new Reaper Bones warband for Frostgrave that I put together and started painting. And for a new thing, I'm getting sucked into the idea of a zombie skirmish game. I haven't really. I liked Outbreak, the demo for Outbreak that we played at Gen Con. The game itself, reading the actual rules, I'm finding they're light in areas I wish they were a little more crunchy, and they're crunchy in areas that, from my own game design early on, long before I ever thought of podcasting, I had learned I don't like games that do X, Y, or Z. The game has that. So still looking. Somebody last night suggested Gutshot with modern models and zombies. And so I might do that. But anyway, so to give I have a big urban board already. So to give it flavor, I've started looking at 143 scale modern, regular, everyday vehicles. And then I went on a little bender. And I got an awesome 143 Coast Guard helicopter because they might come and rescue you during a zombie apocalypse. And I got a VW bus because that would be an awesome thing to try to run away in. I got an 18-wheel tanker truck because that takes up a lot of real estate. I got a Humvee because, the military's got. Then I went nutty. These last two items I kind of paid through the nose for. There were only 3 of these in the whole world that I could find. So I bought one I believe I got it from Croatia. It's a 143 scale Humvee ambulance, which is going to be awesome for zombie games. And then I found, these were everywhere, but they cost a lot everywhere, a New Hampshire State Police SUV, 143 scale.
Nice.
So which I got, and I got all excited. And now when I see the state troopers on the highway, I'm like, oh my God, I've got one of those. But then I realized they wouldn't care. So that's what I've been doing.
Nice. That is quite the impressive list you got there.
Yeah, there's a lot of half-done things on that list, though. I'm not as excited as, not as accomplished as I would have liked.
All right, what about other geeky goodness? Ross, what about movies, video games, TV shows, all that stuff?
Oh, wow, I can talk about all those. Movie-wise, I saw some new stuff and some old stuff recently, the new stuff being Ant-Man.
Ooh,
what'd you think of Ant-Man?
I really liked it. I think their decision to make it like a heist movie was just the best possible.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Yeah, without giving away too many spoilers, I mean, I'll just say I really...
Oh, don't worry. Russ does that on Twitter all the time.
I do.
Okay. Well, I'll just say that I loved all the characters and all the interesting little twists they throw in there with some of the characters and sort of doing homage to the old comic book, legacy of Ant-Man and his surrounding cast, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, agreed.
Then I saw an old movie. It came out in 1996, and I brought it up on Netflix and watched it again. It's called The Substitute. It stars Tom Berenger. It's about a mercenary who gets hired to become a substitute teacher at a school where they're dealing drugs. This is a 90s movie, right? Mm-hmm. And the best part about this, I mean, it's just such a guilty pleasure, but I love it, is Ernie Hudson from the Ghostbusters. Ernie Hudson is the villain, and he is so sleazy. Oh my God, he just exudes.
He did a lot of that in the 80s and 90s.
Oh my God, he's just fantastic in this film. So if you're looking for something to watch on Netflix and you don't really care, if it's new, go look at The Substitute.
Cool.
Let's see, video game wise. Well, I've been playing quite a bit of Star Trek Online. I got kind of sucked into this MMO about a year ago, and I have been playing ever since. I've got like 9 characters, all max level.
Yeah, nice.
You're hooked when you got that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of falling in love with Star Trek all over again. I've watched all the episodes of Next Gen while I have been playing the MMO, right, to get the double dose at the same time.
Both things, maybe.
Yeah, both, exactly. And just being able to tool around the galaxy in a Galaxy class starship, blowing up the crystal entity is pretty awesome. I enjoy that. And then let's see, for console, there's a game that came out a while back, I guess. It's called Sniper Elite 3. Oh, yeah, and I don't keep up on the latest console games or anything like that, but man, this is a really interesting and fun game. It's a third-person shooter, not a first-person. So you're moving your little sniper dude around. It switches to the scope view when you zoom in, right?
Yep.
And it's pretty much everything I love about stealth action games and sniping people from really ridiculous long distances and setting up traps. It's a game that really rewards you for taking a look at the environment before you get down into it, planning out your attack, and then executing it the right way. So highly, highly recommend it. It's just super fun. There's a edition out right now that includes most of the DLC for the game, which includes there's one of the DLCs is you get to kill Hitler.
Ooh.
Which is pretty, I mean, that's pretty amazing. There's 7 different ways to kill Hitler, by the way.
Oh, cool.
So super fun game. And this is a thing I've been really looking forward to talking about this with you guys. There are some books I've read recently that are just great.
Oh, really? What?
Surprisingly good.
Okay, wait. I got to go to Audible so I can put them on my wish list. Okay, go.
Well, the first one I read, it was called Armada. It's the new book by Ernest Cline. You may know him from Ready Player One.
Yeah.
You guys, if I remember correctly, you guys really liked Ready Player One.
Yes, I did very much so.
Well, you've got to check out Armada. I'm not going to say it's a perfect book by any means, but it's really grippingly entertaining. And I found myself laughing out loud with the character when funny moments would come up, or feeling tension. And so it was a book that really made me get into it. Highly recommend that one for you guys.
Oh, very cool.
There's another book that it's funny. Okay, this guy's name is Victor Milan, is the writer, and he's a old school BattleTech writer from the old way back in the day. I used to love reading all of Victor's books in the 90s for BattleTech. And so when I saw his name pop up as he's got a new book out, I instantly went out there and grabbed it. Like, there was just no question. And the book is called The Dinosaur Lords. Now, I'm going to describe it, and I'm going to describe it in a way that's going to make a lot of people go, okay, whatever, and probably not read the book. So keep that in mind, that this is the best description I can give you, but it doesn't even come close to like how good a book it is. It's basically a Game of Thrones with dinosaurs in it. Not the dinosaurs of the people. Dinosaurs are like the things the knights are riding around on and stuff like that. But it's very, I guess what I'm trying to say is like an intrigue heavy fantasy, sort of feudal medieval fantasy. With the addition of dinosaurs are a big part of the world, and it's really well done. Especially if you liked the Joe Abercrombie books,
right? I
think you would really like this.
All right, I'll check that out. Dinosaurs.
And then lastly, these are a little more light on the lighthearted end. They're much more what I would say like an easy read, but I love the way this guy writes. The author's name is Marshall Ryan Maresca, and he's got 2 books out right now. One's called The Thorn of Denton Hill, and one's called A Murder of Mages. Now, again, I'm going to describe these in very broad terms, but it's not really going to capture all of the awesomeness that are in them. Thorn of Denton Hill is basically saying, what if Harry Potter was Batman?
Wait, what now?
Yeah. There's a school of magic in a city that is beset by criminals and drug dealers and all kinds of, magical mystery. And one of the students has made it his personal mission to like shut down the crime in this city, and all the things he learns at the school he then puts into use, which is very exciting and interesting. And then A Murder of Mages is the same city. And you get a lot. I won't say you have to read Thorn of Denton Hill first. I think Murder of Mages is slightly better as a book, slightly more entertaining. But they're separate series, so you can read them on their own. But there are some things that kind of cross over between them. And A Murder of Mages, this is the thing that I think is great. It's basically a buddy cop story in a fantasy world with mages and stuff like that. And it opens just brilliantly. Like, if I was ever going to sit down and say, I want to write a story about police, with magic, with, crazy stuff happening in a city, how would I open that book? And he writes this beautiful opening that hooks you right from the start and gets you right into these characters and why they're partnered up and why they're out there investigating the crimes and things that they do. So highly, highly recommend those books for you guys, especially, and for any of the listeners who are interested.
Oh, very cool.
Sounds good.
Sound awesome. I have added them to my queue, Ross.
Woohoo!
They're in there.
But they're not in Audible. I'm not finding them. Are you finding them in Audible?
Yes, Thorn of A Murder of Mages is in there. I found it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
These are all pretty new. So
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, Craig's working on that. I'll do mine next. You can go last.
Thanks.
All right. So but watching lots of the TV. It's sort of a dead season, so I'm catching up on the summer shows, and I am really still loving Killjoys. Killjoys gets better every episode, to the point now where it's one of my favorite shows on television. And whenever there's a new episode available on, I happen to watch it on Xbox. Whenever there's a new episode, I get most excited for that show. So really, really, really loving Killjoys. As a contrast, I am getting less and less interested in Dark Matter. To the point where I've actually fallen behind in it, and I am not as compelled to catch up in it as I am to look for other series. And so on that note, I went and left Dark Matter and started looking for other series and found everybody was telling me to watch Sense8. Have you guys seen this show, Sense8?
Seen the commercials.
So it's a little bit avant-garde. Is that fair, Ross? Is that the way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
It's sort of like, it's Game of Thrones-esque in terms of the amount of sex they feel they need to show.
Okay.
I would say.
Sex position.
Yes, it's sex position, which is a thing now. Now, Sense8 is a pure Netflix series, so the good news is the entire first season just pops up ready to go. But if that doesn't bother you or you enjoy that or whatever, it's a great show because it's got this sci-fi thing going on where it takes place in our time, our world. But what's happening is, for some reason, these people there's like some number of people around the world that are all over the planet that once in a while we're not really sure yet if they can be in each other's body, but they see what each other sees and experiences what each other experiences. So there's some kind of weird connection going on there that we don't know what it is, and that's as much as I'll give away. So part of the show is sort of this, what the heck's going on? And it's got sort of that conspiracy thing going where there's certain people or agencies that know about these people and for some reason want them. But all that, but it's pretty cool. Ross, have you watched it? What do you think of Sense8? Have you given it a try yet?
I haven't seen more than like one episode, so I don't think I'm really qualified to talk about it.
I have watched it more than 20 minutes. Yes, thank you for asking, Phil. I'm on episode like...
he didn't ask, he just thought.
No, he's thinking about it. I got it from his senses. I'm on episode 3 now, and I'm liking it. I'm all the way to the latest episode of Killjoys, liking it. I made it through episode 5 of Dark Matter and decided I would come back to it later. Also, still, Craig, have you been keeping up with Defiance?
I just watched the latest episode last night.
Me too. So Defiance had me a little nervous. It was starting to get into a pick a character of the week and have them have a nervous breakdown mode.
Yeah.
But I think it's recovered from that and it's now being interesting again. So
I hope so, because it got really dark.
Yeah. I didn't mind the darkness as much as it was like every major character was like, and now I'm going to fail.
Right. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Like there were no bright spots.
Right. It was like
it became very Game of Thrones-ish.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's becoming Game of Thrones where there are no good guys, there are no bad guys. There's just
you and me, and we just disagree.
Yes.
Oh,
thank you.
I see what you did there.
I'm here all week.
Yeah.
So yes, and then in book department,
I love that you still have to put in parentheses guilty pleasure when you mention these books.
They are guilty pleasure. Although I will
really makes me curious.
I will say this. So I have now finished the Gail Carriger's Parasol Protectorate series, which is her first series, but I read it second because the Finishing School series that she wrote is sort of a prequel. So I read that first, although that's not finished. She's got another book coming out this fall for that one. The Parasol Protector was her first series. Now I'm going to move on to her latest series, which starts with Prudence, which follows the adventures of the main character. Well, anyway, it's further in the timeline of the same universe. I loved it. I loved the whole first series. The first book definitely had romance novel flavors to it, which kind of peter out in the second book. And while there's still some of those overtones in the books, they really turn into a really interesting and compelling and a bunch of things happen in the early books where it seems unrelated and it all kind of ties up nicely in the end. Really, really well done. Still has that great humor that she's got woven throughout all the books. The steampunk fantasy thing she just does a really good job of it. And she crafts a world without doing exposition, which I think is hard to do. And really, if you can do that well, it's fantastic. So really, if you like steampunk and you like supernatural stuff, and you don't mind the occasional bit of naughty, I would say guilty. I would say this is a definite
occasional bit of naughty.
Yeah, it's no worse than Sense8. I mean, actually, it's not as graphic as Sense8 for sure.
Well, Russ worked his Jedi mind trick on me, and I have now got the series on my list of things to read. I haven't started them yet. I'm still in the middle of a couple other books, but I will eventually read them.
All right, so let me go what you think, Ross. Let me know what you think.
I sure will.
And if you want to dip your toe in and you're worried, you're nervous about that whole thing, try the Finishing School series first. It's definitely written for young adult readers, but much like Harry Potter, I think it appeals to any age group. Good stuff. All right. So that is me. Craig, now that you've got your book list all worked out there, are you ready to tell us what you've been...
Okay, yeah. So let's see. I saw Ant-Man also, and really enjoyed it, as we've said. Really fun. I'm glad that they let... I always forget his name!
Michael Douglas.
No. Main
Paul Rudd.
guy. Ant-Man.
Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd, thank you. Always forget his name. Sorry, Paul. I know you're a listener. I love that they. I love that they let him be himself, like be the kind of character that he normally plays. So he's kind of goofy, kind of funny. They went with the humor, so I thought it was great. I just saw Mission Impossible 3 and really enjoyed that too. It's not as good as Tom Cruise's latest sci-fi movies, because in those I completely forget that I'm watching Tom Cruise. In this, I had a couple moments where I was like, wow, Tom Cruise is really good.
Now, did you see Rogue Nation or did you see 3?
Rogue Nation, whichever.
Okay, that's 4.
Is it 4? Yeah, see, I must have missed one somewhere along the line. But so I enjoyed that immensely. Television, I went back and saw the last episode of Wayward Pines, which I've talked about before. Weird. Talk about a show that has no shame in killing characters off. That would be Wayward Pines. So I'm intrigued about what they're going to be doing. The season finale has like a 5-minute epilogue to it that goes, oh, so that might be where they're headed with next season. But it was a lot of cool, intriguing things going on there. That was cool. The last
M. Night Shyamalan one?
Yes. That's why it's all weird and wacky. In my opinion, this is him not giving up on the plot line of The Happening. If you remember that, where the trees turned against us because we're all bad.
Is that why the pines are wayward?
There's a lot going on in that show underneath the surface. I'm telling you.
Right.
Like, once you get to the "oh my god, this is M. Night Shyamalan" moment, you'll know it, and then you'll go on from there and go, "Wow, he doesn't usually kill this many characters." But yes, it is an M. Night Shyamalan show. Then there's The Last Ship, which is that plague wipes out most of the Earth, and there's one naval destroyer that was in the Antarctic when it occurred, so they didn't get infected. So I'm really enjoying it. I find it intriguing that it has nothing whatsoever other than there's a ship involved to do with the novel, but the guy who wrote the novel gets a credit every episode, which I think is awesome. I'm really enjoying that, although it's getting to the point where it's getting dark and the good guys can't get anything to work out. And the latest episode was really like, seriously, can not a single thing work for these guys? So they're kind of losing me a little bit on that, but so I'm still sticking with it, and I really enjoy the characters. Defiance, Russ already talked about. I agree with him immensely. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell from BBC America. Again, it came out of the BBC over in England last year. I've had a lot of people tweet and email me about it. Most of them are like, yeah, it's all, the TV show is good and the books are okay. And I have one or two ardent super fans of the books that are like, how dare you say that it ended like there was going to be another one. There aren't any more books, so how could there be another series or another season? So typical British TV where they go for one season. And I was not really satisfied with the ending. And then Killjoys, which I'm still really enjoying, and I want to defend Dark Matter, but then I look at my TiVo and I go, wow, Russ is right. I keep going to other things and not Dark Matter. So whatever it is about Dark Matter is not pulling me back to Dark Matter when I'm going to watch The Last Ship and Wayward Pines and Defiance and Killjoys. Although I am really looking forward to Fear the Walking Dead, which it premieres this Sunday.
Woohoo!
There you go.
And then finally, books. I'm gonna make it really short. The first night of Gen Con, after I talked with Ross, I went right up to my hotel room and tried to get Armada by Ernest Cline onto my Kindle, and my connection was so bad at the hotel that it took overnight to get it, and I was up till 1 trying to make it work. So I blame you for that first sleepless night.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Then I read the book. I do not like what's his name that does the narration You guys all love him. He's like a god to you.
Will Wheaton.
Come on. Will Wheaton. There you
yes.
go. Will Wheaton. Yeah, I do not. I don't care for his persona or his voice. So I knew I was going to read it anyway. I wasn't going to wait for the audiobook. So I read it, and I found it thin compared to Ready Player One. Ready Player One there's a lot going on, and a lot of it went over my head because I wasn't a video game player at all, actually. But the plot was very innovative. It was really neat. The action was kind of, was really served the storyline. And I really enjoyed it. I know that I wasn't the target audience, but at the same time, I really enjoyed it. This time I felt like he was going to the well a second time and finding it a little dry with all the references to, spaceship movies and the music and such. And that he was kind of in my wheelhouse on this one. And I was like, I feel like you did this already. And it felt until the very end, and the end did redeem itself somewhat. But through most of the book, I felt like he was sort of kind of like making gentle fun of a genre while at the same time just completely recreating the genre. Sort of like he tried to get meta and he didn't quite get out of his head enough. But then at the end, it kind of brings it back around, and it gets you can see the brain behind Ready Player One at the end of Armada. To me, I thought the end really it ended in a very satisfying way for me.
Well, let me ask you this question.
Yes, Ross.
Did you, when you were a kid, did you watch Iron Eagle or Robotech?
How many times?
Okay, so if you are a fan of Iron Eagle and Robotech, then you are exactly the person he was.
That's what I'm saying.
So, okay,
and what I felt was he was like he kept. Not so much mocking, referencing. He kept referencing them, but then not going beyond them, just recreating them. So he was like, oh, the Last Starfighter, oh, this, oh, that. But he was literally just recreating the tropes that he was kind of like in Ready Player One, he was bringing up all these tropes, but they were all spun and different and, refracted through this whole futuristic experience. In this, he was bringing up the tropes and then recreating them. Until the end, which again, like I said, the end was like, wow, okay, cool. And even, I mean, I would say there's a big spin at the end, or a big sort of M. Night Shyamalan-ish twist at the end. and then a small, there's like a smaller one that's like, oh, cool. And then there's a bigger one, but bigger at the same time, much more subtle. And I think either one of those makes it a cool ending. Both of them together, you're like, oh, okay, this is the guy that did Ready Player One. It just, to me, most of the book that it took to get there seemed more, I don't know, like he would bring up the tropes in Ready Player One. He would bring up the tropes and then flip it on its head. In this, it took a long time to flip all those tropes, I guess.
Okay,
is what I'm saying.
That's an interesting one.
Listening to Dance with Dragons still, trying desperately to finish. It's not sucking as much as I anticipated, so I'm confused. I am left with the opinion that grows firmer by the day that a new generation of reader is going to fully appreciate George R.R. Martin if he doesn't die before the series ends. And the fact that we who are reading it contemporaneously with his writing it are sort of experiencing the books and the drama of his writing at the same time, and that's sort of what's poisoning the experience here towards the end a little bit, because I am enjoying the book more this time around. I'm listening to it, which is good because it's Roy Dotrice, and it's not Roy Dotrice reading Feast for Crows, which was just a bizarre experience. And somebody emailed me or tweeted me that, like, oh yeah, you're gonna like it. It's better than the other guy, but it's weird because he's got all the pronunciations wrong. And it's true. In A Feast for Crows, he pronounces almost everybody's name wrong. And then, gladly, back with Dance with Dragons, he's back to pronouncing them all correctly. So that's good. But yeah, so I'm intrigued, I guess. I'm enjoying it. I'm not finding it as much of a slog as I was afraid it was. It's still a huge slog with Danny over in Marine. Not a lot going on over there. I am getting confused in my head now with the show. Now that the show has sort of gone beyond the book, I'm like, oh, has that happened yet? Is that gonna happen? I don't know. But I'm enjoying it still. And again, going back to my zombie skirmish fetish, I went and for $1.99 you can get Max Brooks's Zombie Survival Guide for Kindle. And he's the one he's the guy who went on to write World War Z, which is awesome. A great writer. So I went and I got that, and I'm enjoying it. It's a little too much like an actual manual, so I'm starting to flip. Like if the heading of the chapter is terrain, I'm skipping over it. I'm going to get to the killing zombies part again, but I'm enjoying it. And I'm going to reread World War Z as soon as I'm done with it, just because it's going to get me all jazzed up for that again. So that's me.
If you're a fan of Max Brooks, there's an episode of him on Sons of Guns where they design a zombie killing gun.
Oh, really?
It's quite good.
Cool.
And the one they come up with, I think, is a winner. So
nice.
check it out if you get a chance.
I will check that out.
Right.
Thank you very much.
And if you want to check all these books out, what you want to do is check out the D6G Audible deal.
That's right.
Head to our website, click the Audible link on the right-hand side, and you'll get all the info you need. And I think that might just be achievements.
That is achievement.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, two men and a revolving third chair and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hey, and now it's time to talk about our friends over at Wild West Exodus, Craig.
Yeehaw! Pew pew!
And I'm here looking at, the miniatures keep getting better and better. Chief Raven Spirit, the guy who's like standing in front of this giant, like shadowy, what is it, shadow? Is it water? Is it spirit? What's going on?
I believe it's like spirit flame.
It looks awesome. It's like this giant just creature coming out of his essence flying.
Yeah, that was getting painted at Gen Con, and it was unbelievable.
The models have gone to plaid for Wild West Exodus. I don't mind saying the poses are sick. The sculpts are sick. Rules still fast, fun, and furious. The factions now, what's the total faction count now, Craig?
Total faction now after the Kickstarter, which is actually looking like it might be delivered ahead of schedule.
That's nice.
Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 if you count the mercenaries.
Factions. And for those who somehow don't know, the Wild West Exodus is a fantastic alternate history universe taking place, Civil War era, right, Craig?
Yeah, 1880s, a little bit after the Civil War, but the Civil War never really ended because of the introduction of sort of evil-powered sci-fi technology.
So it's got this sort of retro sci-fi thing going on with lasers and robotics and all kinds of cool stuff. It's just a really cool looking. Yeah. The universe is cool. The fiction, which I know Craig is going to be modest and not talk about it, but I think the fiction's fantastic. The artwork is amazing. The sculpts are fantastic. Gameplay's fast. The universe is awesome. You need to check this out. And to check all of it out, the best place to go is wildwestexodus.com.
It's all there. Look at all those models. It's beautiful.
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland? I used to have my own segment, now I'm relegating to announcing this
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome back to another App of the Ep. This time around features one of my favorite ladies in gaming, Laura Croft. For those of you who have not seen this yet, Laura Croft Go is now out for iOS and Android. It is a great little puzzler game, and it is $5, $4.99 in both the Android Play Store and the iTunes iOS App Store. What I really like about this one is, again, one of those great puzzlers with great, fantastic graphics. It does feature Lara Croft, and it does, for those of you who haven't played any of the Go series, there's been a few different games in the Go line. But basically, you just swipe to move your character sort of one little step at a time through various mazes and obstacles. What I like about Lara Croft is it really has some interesting obstacles that do level up as you go. So, for example, you start off by trying to get around some snakes. In the angle you approach the snakes, if you come at them from the back or the side, she can pull her guns and shoot them. If she comes at them from the front, the snakes will bite her first. You got to get around the snakes. This eventually escalates to getting spears you can throw at different animals, to rolling boulders, to lizard sort of creatures that'll chase you around, giant serpent creatures that are zipping through and destroying the caverns. Great graphics, great puzzles. Some of them really pretty good mind bending. I have been told a lot of the folks out there say it's a little short for their tastes. I've been playing it on and off. It's a nice little time killer when I'm in the car or waiting at the grocery store or whatever. And I've not finished it yet. I've had it for about 2 or 3 weeks now. Still haven't finished it. So for my money, $5 is a fair price for this one, for the great graphics and the great puzzles as well. So if you like those little puzzlers, what I also like about it is because it's not real time, because you're moving sort of pace at a time, you can play it while you're also distracted or doing other things. It's not one of those games that requires your full undivided attention to be able to enjoy it. And also, while the sound is great, you don't need to have the sound on. So it's a great game. You pull out, do a level or two, and then put away, when you get to the front of the line and check out your groceries or whatever. So, highly recommend it. Lara Croft Go. Check it out on iOS and Android today. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App. A segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class. Hey, welcome back. And now we cannot have Ross Watson on the show without, rapping with Ross a little bit, right? Getting to see what you've been up to, Mr. Watson, because you are
a rap.
If there is a gamer about town, it is you, sir.
Man, the only rap I know is Parappa the Rapper, and I don't think you want to hear that. Punch, kick.
Let's keep with your core competencies. Let's stick with your core competencies here and not go for rapping. Let's go for game design, because you have been one busy little beaver.
It's true.
So what have you been working on, really, Ross? We're gonna dive in here and ask you all kinds of questions. It's gonna be like free form, and you're gonna tell us what you're working on, and Craig and I are gonna ask all kinds of pervasive and
probably not pervasive
detailed questions that you probably won't be able to answer, but it's okay, because as we've done in the past, Charlie, the little cherub there, he is outside Ross's window right now with the paddles.
That's right.
So please grab those paddles, Ross.
Electrocute him if he does not tell the truth.
And make sure you answer honestly and to your best of your ability. So
not to a lethal extent.
Right.
There will be a painful shock.
Yes. So what have you been working on lately?
Wow, I got to wonder about Charlie. Have you lost any guests because Charlie was a little overzealous?
Not that we can legally report.
There have been guests that have only made one appearance, so we don't know exactly what's happened to them.
And there may be a lawsuit, but we're not at liberty to discuss it at this time. Our lawyers advise against it.
All right, guys. Right. Well, I have been super busy with a bunch of stuff. I think probably the most prominent thing I should talk about right now is I've been doing a lot of work with Pinnacle Entertainment Group, which is, of course, the guys behind Savage Worlds.
Yes, one of Craig and my's favorite RPGs.
Systems.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, Savage Worlds is a fantastic system. I fell in love with it like a couple of years ago, and I've been designing for it pretty much ever since. There's a couple of really cool things that have just came out. One of them is called Savage Lankamar, which is all about the Fritz Lieber, Pfaffer, and the Grey Mouser stuff. This was released, I think, kind of oddly, it was released at the same time as an old school Renaissance version that was produced for the Dungeon Crawl Classics. So you have two different ways to go out there and enjoy Lankamar, one of which being Savage Worlds, and I worked on that. I got to come up with official Savage Worlds rules, or stats, I should say, for Pfafford and the Grey Mouser themselves, which was pretty awesome.
Now, you're no stranger to Savage Worlds, and we had you on the show back at episode 143 where we talked about Savage Worlds and your adaptation of Accursed, right?
That's right.
Accursed for Savage Worlds. And then, of course, we reviewed, if you're interested in Savage Worlds, Ross wasn't on this episode, but we also reviewed Savage Worlds back in episode 97. So long-time listeners will know.
We are big fans of Savage Worlds, and we've talked about it a lot.
That were huge. But Ross, you mentioned this to me at Gen Con, and I really wanted to dig in on this. So another RPG that I love the world of was Rifts. And
we were in a big campaign of Rifts.
We were, and I love the universe. Now, the mechanics of the Rifts universe, was sort of old school RPG, so a little heavy, but I love the universe. And you told me at Gen Con you're involved now in making a sort of a Savage Worlds version of Rifts?
That's right. It's going to be called Savage Rifts.
Ooh,
and it's a joint
very
project.
Clever.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, we think, the name needs to be simple and communicate exactly what it is.
Kind of says it all, really.
It's a joint venture between Pinnacle, Palladium, and my company, Evil Beagle Games. My partner, Patrick Fannin, he's the one who's doing all the design work. I'm the lead developer on Savage Rifts. I got to do some, interesting bits and pieces with some of the design as well. But for the most part, it's Sean's baby. I'm sort of helping him get it to market. And it is exciting. I love the world of Rifts. And, I'm actually looking forward to running a game for you guys maybe next year at Gen Con to get you.
Sold.
Well, we did that Deathwatch game a while back.
Yes.
You guys got to play your favorite Space Marines. Well, now you can play your favorite Rifts characters in Savage Rifts, which leverages the strength of the Savage Worlds game system to bring this awesome setting to a whole new group of fans.
Now, let me ask you this. If I have an old Rifts character,
yes,
can I somehow translate him into a Savage Rifts character?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Oh, cool.
We are launching Savage Rifts with the idea that anything you could make in the core Rifts book, the Rifts or Rifts Ultimate Edition, you can make now using Savage Worlds and using specific rules that we've come up with. And it's really exciting, actually. We've done some things to bring front and center some of the stuff that was a little bit more in the background for some of the character types. I think one of my favorites is for Juicers, we brought to the forefront the fact that you have a very short lifespan because Juicers are powered basically by this computer system that pumps combat drugs into their bodies almost at all times. So they have a very short lifespan. And we brought that front and center with some really interesting rules that when you're playing Savage Rifts, it's going to be a case of you're going to look down at your character sheet at some point when you're playing Savage Rifts and go, oh my gosh, today's the day. Either I go out in a blaze of glory or I need a detox.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this. So as you do something like that, this is a really interesting project. So you're taking sort of a beloved, RPG universe, which is Rifts.
Yes.
A lot of people really have fond memories of it and are still actively playing it now even. And you're translating it to a whole new set of mechanics, right? Or I assume it's all new. So how do you
the Savage
World mechanics?
Yeah.
So how do you distill what the essence of Rifts is? Is it purely just background with Savage World mechanics, or how did you kind of say there's certain elements of how the game used to play that we've got to keep to make it feel like Rifts?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we had to keep was the idea of mega damage.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
So now obviously it works a little differently in Savage Worlds because mega damage in the classic Rifts, mega damage was kind of a way to detect to really show that you have a really powerful gun or a really powerful suit of armor.
Now, would we be out of line, Russ, do you think, if we ask Ross for just like a really quick 50,000 foot overview of what Rifts is? As we keep going on talking about Rifts, there's probably a lot of people who have no idea what we're talking about.
Yes, but I want to come back to mega damage. So putting a pin in mega damage.
Yeah.
All right, Ross.
Put a pin. We all know how much we love saying put a pin in mega damage.
That didn't come up on the price of the game.
Well, that's because that's fairly new, and it was. I think it was a lost chapter where we expounded upon our love of put a pin in.
So put a pin in mega damage. I'll come back to that, but we probably should. For those who are not familiar with Rifts, Ross, what is sort of the essence for both mechanics and fluff-wise? What is the essence of the Rifts?
What's the big draw?
Yeah, right. Why do you play Rifts?
Okay, well, Rifts is basically the quintessential multi-genre kitchen sink role-playing game setting. It came out in 1990. It's been published continuously since then. So we're talking about 25 years of development of this particular setting. Some of the things that are really interesting about it is it tends to explore transhumanism. You have guys who are basically a brain inside a robot body, like RoboCop. You have guys like the Juicers who transform themselves into short-lived but awesome super soldiers. You got guys that basically harness the power of their mind to transform their bodies. It's interesting. It has a lot to do with how far will you go to protect the people you love, right? Because it is a post-apocalyptic setting.
Right.
Earth was basically ravaged by some kind of apocalyptic nuclear war. And because of this, the deaths of all these millions of living beings releases all this magical energy back into Earth, activating these ley lines that crisscross the planet. And when the ley lines connect, they open rifts between our universe and other universes, our reality and other realities.
Right.
So demons and crazy aliens and other fantasy worlds and things like that all kind of started pouring into and onto Earth. So for 200 or 300 years, basically, our old world was completely gone. It was a new dark age, and humanity was just a shrinking population of survivors. And then sort of Rifts picks up at that point, about 200 or 300 years after this, where humanity is starting to come back from the brink of destruction.
Right.
And Rift's Earth is a very different place. There's a whole new continent called Atlantis. There's magic and psionics are extremely common. There's an awful lot of really impressive high tech from what they call the pre-Rifts era, which was very advanced. And then you have just kind of some interesting mysteries and villains that populate this world. And of course, one thing we're doing with Savage Rifts to really, I think, focus in on what makes Rifts great is we're introducing what I like to call the adventuring paradigm. Okay.
Oh, cool.
And in a role-playing game, an adventuring paradigm is basically context for you to make your character. So you say, who am I, what am I doing, and why? Right? And adventuring paradigms are also good for GMs because if a GM wants to run a game really, kind of off the cuff, he needs to have some kind of context to say, okay, here's the mission that you guys are going on. And so for Savage Rifts, what we've come up with is the idea that there's this small group in North Arkansas, South Missouri, called the Tomorrow Legion. And the Tomorrow Legion are trying to help people that are trapped between the Federation of Magic, which is this big nation of guys who are, into demons and magic, and they're basically pretty evil. They just want power for themselves. And the Coalition states, which the Coalition is the human first. We are going to rebuild America, by humans for humans. But they're also pretty aggressive and totalitarian. So you got these two major powers who are squabbling over the area, and the Tomorrow Legion is helping people who are stuck in the middle. So you are playing heroes. You are playing guys that work for this group and are being sent out there into the wasteland to find towns or find people that are in trouble and help them out. So it's about playing heroes in this post-apocalyptic multi-genre world where you can have a guy in a suit of power armor next to an incredibly powerful psionic mastermind next to
a cyborg space cowboy.
Yeah, next to a cowboy or next. There's all kinds of different ways to do it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's basically what we're talking about for the setting of Rifts.
That's what I liked about it is that it is sci-fi, but it's also got so much crazy stuff going on that you can pretty much do whatever you want in there, which is really cool.
Any genre you can imagine kind of folds into Rifts, including superheroes.
Yeah.
So it was like guys throwing around, let's say, mega damage.
Right. So,
and now we're back to this.
The pin's out, Ross. So what is the essence of mega damage in Rifts, and then how did you guys capture it in Savage Rifts?
So one of the core mechanical elements of Rifts is this idea of mega damage, where they have really powerful technology or spells that can tap into incredibly strong bursts of magic. And mega damage was a way to show that you could sort of overcome anything that we can imagine in our own world as being tough and strong with ease. Okay, so like a tank would be a mega damage thing. If we can imagine a tank, that would be a mega damage thing. But a car would not. And you could carry a handgun that could pretty much destroy a car with a single shot.
Right.
Stuff like that. So for Savage Worlds, there's obviously it's a very different set of rules than the ones in Rifts, and it handles combat, it handles all these things very differently. So we wanted to make sure that mega damage, the idea was still there, but it obviously has to change in some of its execution. Mm-hmm. And for guys who know Savage Worlds, basically mega damage is like the heavy category. Okay, mm-hmm. So if I'm wearing mega damage armor, it means it's heavy armor, which means that if you don't have a heavy weapon, for the most part, your shots are just going to bounce right off of me. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if I have a mega damage weapon, it counts as a heavy weapon. Heavy weapons can hurt heavy armor. Mega damage weapons can hurt mega damage armor. It's a very simple, easy thing to remember. Now, because Savage Worlds works slightly differently, you don't need to worry about oh no, I better have mega damage armor or else I'm totally dead. Because your armor still counts against a mega damage weapon. And you still get to make your checks to soak damage and things like that against mega damage weapons. It's just that they are the type of weapon you need to have in order to hurt something with mega damage armor.
Right.
So our design goal is basically this. Does it feel like a tank? Then it's mega damage. Does it feel like a tank gun? It's also mega damage. And we used a lot of we basically were thinking like, okay, if you imagine yourself playing like Saving Private Ryan or Sergeant Rock or something like that, and you're cruising around Europe during World War II, you're going to run into some panzers. Okay, and you and your guys need things like bazookas to deal with panzers. Rifts is a lot like that in terms of it is a world where there's an awful lot of things that are like panzers that you need bazookas to deal with.
Right.
So that's where the mega damage comes in.
Very cool. So it's really more of just a mechanic that says, you'll need this sort of like a paper scissors rock thing. You need to be able to go to that level to be able to take those things on.
Right.
Very cool.
And a lot there's almost every character has a different way of getting there if he really wants to do mega damage. There's the guys called the Bursters, who are these exceptionally powerful psychic pyrokinetics. Okay, kind of like the girl in Firestarter.
Yep.
And they can do some pretty serious and interesting things with fire, including creating fire that can damage mega damage armor.
Oh, cool.
For example, yeah. So pretty much everybody has a way to get there, which is cool but we wanted to keep the idea in because without mega damage, it's really not Rifts.
Now let me ask you this about the production. I don't know how involved you are with the whole production cycle. You're mostly on the rules and mechanics side of this thing, or are you doing other parts too?
Well, as basically the lead developer of Savage Rifts, I'm doing art and scheduling and layout, and I'm doing a lot of the sort of book plans, making sure Sean is on schedule, things like that.
See, this is perfect because I have other questions that you may not be able to answer. But Charlie, get right there. So, art, is it all new art? Is it old art? Is it a blending of the two? How original is this going to feel versus how much is it going to capture the nostalgia?
Well, as I said, Rifts has been continuously published since 1990.
Right.
Okay? And there's an awful lot of really great stuff out there for Rifts, and we want to. It's important to us that we celebrate, the cool visuals that have been associated with Rifts for a long time. But it would be, I think, a missed opportunity not to take advantage of the new artists and styles and things that are out there and make some really great new art. So we're focusing on Savage Rifts on creating new art that is very evocative of the old Rift style.
Cool.
So we're doing full color. So almost all the Rifts products in the past have been black and white. So we're doing full color. And it's going to be really exciting to look at. We've got some pieces that are already in it.
I do approve. Full color. And also, is it all new background material and fluff too? Kind of, it's the same universe, but do you re-explain it with new stories and new background?
We are re-explaining it. Basically, we're setting Savage Rifts right after the major events of what was called the Siege on Tolkien, which was this big event in Rifts that took place, I want to say, 10 to 15 years ago. And it was one of the most major world-shaking events where an entire city basically got wiped out in this war with Coalition. And sort of the aftermath of that big event is where we're setting.
So it's all new story. So it continues to progress the Rift universe.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we are absolutely plugged into the Rift universe. We want to be.
So it's not a reboot. It's an extension of. Cool.
No. Yeah, it's an extension of. Absolutely.
Right.
And the actual game Rift is continuing to develop and move forward on its own track as well.
Yeah, Sean is working very closely with the guys over at Palladium, Kevin Simbeda and those guys, and we're going to keep our stuff very much in line with theirs. Mm-hmm. And so far, what I've heard is that they're very excited with the stuff that we're doing. So I think it's going to be a real big hit with basically all people who are big Rifts fans, even if they're Palladium Rifts fans, if they're Rifts fans that played a long time ago and haven't played in years, if they're guys who have never heard of it. I think they're going to come to Savage Rifts or Palladium Rifts and see, I think, what makes this setting so great.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think we could talk about Rifts all day, but you have many other projects. So we should probably, if we want to cover the full gamut, that is Ross Watson.
That's right. He is a deep man.
It is. So Ross, yes. What other major projects? What's the next one we can grill you on here?
Well, let's stick with Savage Worlds for just a minute. Because I want to shift more. I want to shift gears after we get done with Savage Worlds. But we talked about Savage Rifts. We talked about Savage Lankamar.
Yeah.
There's more stuff on the horizon for Accursed, which we did talk about quite a bit back in the day.
Yes.
We're going to be launching a Kickstarter for an Accursed World book sometime in 2016, and we're really excited about that.
Well, that's awesome. So that just extends. Was there going to be more like different places you can adventure, or is it going to have more monsters? All of the above, like how you?
All of the above.
Oh, cool.
we had a really big reaction from Accursed for just 3 guys making a setting for Savage Worlds. We weren't sure what to expect, but we actually got a lot of people saying how much they enjoyed it, how much they were excited about it. There's some guys in Brazil right now that are doing a Kickstarter to translate it. It's already funded.
Oh, cool.
To translate it into Portuguese, and they're creating their own stuff for it. Accursed got onto a bunch of best of 2014 RPG lists and things like that.
Nice.
So
Nice.
we're absolutely following up with some more awesome things for Accursed. And on top of that, I've got a book coming out for Weird War 1, which I don't know exactly when that's happening, but the Weird Wars is a big thing for Pinnacle, and that's going to be, I imagine, later this year or early next year.
Very cool.
And
So
is
that's
that
Savage Worlds.
what is Weird War? Oh, it's that's another Savage Worlds.
Correct. Yeah, I wanted to get all the Savage Worlds out of the way. Weird Wars is Pinnacle. They like to go and do alternate takes of different timelines with weird and crazy stuff, weird science, werewolves, monsters.
Well, that's like Rafe's big actual interest.
It's like zombies and supernatural stuff during World War I era.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Can you give any idea like what it was you were working on?
Oh yeah,
any kind of cool hints?
Absolutely.
Just a little glimpse. I know there's big things we need to talk about, but I'm always curious about what I mean. Ross has his fingers in so many pies, showing how diversified his talent and knowledge base is.
Yes.
I'm just curious for my own sake, and there's probably 1 or 2 people out there who are curious as well.
Well, I hope there's 1 or 2 people out there for sure. I'm always glad to share with you guys what I'm working on. And Weird War 1, I've worked on a few bestiaries in my time. I'm kind of well known as a bestiary guy. So for Weird War 1, that's what they tapped me to do, was create a list of crazy, weird monsters that you might run into on the battlefields of Weird War 1.
Oh, cool.
So we have everything from the Teufelhunden, which are the literal devil dogs, to the Bloody Baron, which is possibly the ghost of Manfred von Richthofen. Yes, that was a fun one to write. And Wire Fiends, which are basically these guys who get tangled up in the barbed wire stretched out.
Is there a rabid undead beagle?
There ought to be.
I
don't think I quite got there, but there is some interesting legends of World War I that I managed to work in some of the ghost stories that they would tell.
Oh, cool.
That's what I was wondering, like how much of the actual lore were you able to dig up and then fold into what you were doing?
Right. Oh yeah, there was this thing called the Hound of Mons. You can look it up. It was basically called the Hellhound of World War I, and it was this sort of dire wolf type creature that would get down in the trenches and tear dudes apart.
I think it should be a beagle which chases the Bloody Baron continually.
Yes, well,
I think this would be a better story. And
I see what you did there.
Yes, I think that's what should happen. So that's awesome, Ross. So you are becoming quite the Savage Worlds expert. Now, did this all sort of come after Accursed, where you sort of demonstrated that you really knew the universe well and could adapt it to different things, and these came in, or these things that happened predated that, or was it tangential, or how did you get all these gigs with Savage Worlds?
I do think that Accursed had something to do with it. I got in touch with Shane Hensley prior to Accursed to make sure that we had the license and the approval of Pinnacle before we got started. And I think he's been watching us. So I have been doing a lot more work with him lately. And of course, once we got started on Savage Rifts, I actually kind of joined the Pinnacle team. You guys probably didn't see it, but I was wearing the Pinnacle shirt at Gen Con. So.
I did not. Yeah. I caught you earlier. I saw you early in the con, so you were not in your Pinnacle shirt at that time, I don't think.
No, I was split between 2 booths. So
yes.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about that second booth, actually?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about that second booth.
What was that?
That's where
booth?
I kept running into you.
Yes. What was that second booth, Ross?
So the second booth is, it's related because they are working with Shane Hensley, but not with Pinnacle. But it's Ulysses Spiel is the name of the booth. Mm-hmm. And they're these guys over in Germany who are huge gamers, and they have a lot of really great products. One called the Dark Eye, which you may have heard of if you've ever been overseas and talked in the RPG circles over there. They talk about it quite a bit. And then the thing that I was absolutely representing there is the new RPG is going to launch next year called Torg Eternity. Mm-hmm. Now, Torg Eternity is Now, this is a reboot. You guys are talking about reboots. Right, this is a reboot of a game that came out right around the same time as Rifts, I think, actually. And it is going to be awesome. It is also a multi-genre game. it is also about Earth getting invaded by other realities. Surprising. So I get to work on
that wheelhouse gets stronger and stronger.
It does.
Now, the neat thing about Torg is it made a big splash back in the 90s, and it was created by a guy called Greg Gordon, and it has some really interesting and unique, innovative mechanics.
Yeah.
Including a deck of cards called the Drama Deck, and you use this to use the Drama Deck not only to track initiative, but also to encourage you to do things in combat that are other than just I smack him with my hardest attack every round. There's a keyword that you get rewarded if you flip over the card and the keyword is, say, taunt or maneuver. Right? If I don't have to do it, but if I do, I get rewarded.
Oh, very cool.
And the whole thing is set up to create drama. That's why it's called the Drama Deck, because the game, Torg Eternity, is meant to be very cinematic. Almost everything in the game is built around the idea of you are making a movie about Earth being invaded by these other realities. Now, unlike Rifts, these other realities are actually becoming part of Earth. Okay? So you could leave New Hampshire, for example, and you could go into the Living Land, which is actually most of the East Coast, and it's full of dinosaurs and lizard men and primitive adventure. Right? And the rules of the Living Land are different than the rules of Core Earth.
Oh, interesting.
So your high technology doesn't work there. Things like that.
Cool. Wow, so
it's actually really, really cool. Now, the idea is that you're playing Storm Knights, these guys that have they've been chosen, if you will, to defend the Earth. And they have an ability to use their own reality, their own cosm, it's called. Their own reality's rules no matter where they are, as long as they sort of spend their possibility energy to do so. So when I say multi-genre game, Rifts is the one where you play the cyborg ninja dragons. Right? And that's awesome for my 12-year-old self, and I absolutely love that approach. Torg Eternity is a slightly different take on the same idea, where you're playing the Shadow next to Jack Burton, next to Conan, fighting dinosaurs one day and then rescuing princesses from a fairy tale castle the next day.
Got it. Very cool.
Yeah, so it's exciting, and like I said, you guys, I'm sure, can understand it's a bit weird to be working on both these properties at the same exact time.
Yeah, you got to keep your alternate universes separate.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm not sure exactly which reality I'm in.
Now, what mechanics?
You'd have it no other way.
Exactly. So now, but unlike Savage Rifts, where you're taking a beloved system like Rifts and putting it into another set of mechanics, or a proven set of mechanics, Torg Eternity is a full reboot of the original mechanics, but just sort of modernized and streamlined a bit, I would imagine, right?
Yes, yeah. As a matter of fact, that's exactly the language that we use, is modernized and streamlined.
So this is really, so what were the essentials? I mean, you mentioned the Drama Deck. Did you replicate that as it was, or how did you kind of capture, you brought that out as sort of the highlight of what defined the game. How are you capturing that element of drama and movie-making feeling in the new version?
Well, the Drama Deck works basically the same way as it did. I mean, obviously some of the cards are going to change, things like that. You have a resource called Possibilities as a Storm Knight that you can spend to do awesome things in the game. Like, as I was saying, if you want to use your high tech in the Living Land, where normally that would not be available, you can spend a possibility, which is you're marshaling your possibility energy, to be able to use that gun, and it will function without causing what's called a contradiction. You can spend possibilities. They're like bennies in Savage Worlds. You can, increase your rolls and do really awesome things with them. And there are, of course, specific things to Torg where it's a D20 system. You get to roll again on 10s and 20s and things of that nature. We're introducing a few new mechanics, sort of some of the modern things to try to address some of the concerns about the old system, because it did come out 25 years ago.
Right.
There's been some advances in game design since then, and since Shane's in charge, Shane Hensley, he knows a thing or two about making the rules understandable and accessible to new players. So it's just another awesome way to experience that whole fun, cinematic, action-packed gameplay that people have come to really enjoy. Now, again, it's done through the multi-genre lens. So, if I'm Conan and I have the rules of my cosm say that I get, bonus points for acting honorable in a situation, then I will get that. Or if I'm playing a guy from what's called the Nile Empire, which is all about pulp adventure, they actually have a law called the law of action, where everything has to be it's more Indiana Jones than anywhere else in the world.
Nice.
Okay. So I can spend 2 possibilities instead of 1, for example. to get really crazy, awesome things to happen.
Very cool.
Things of that nature. So there's a lot of really fun little bits and pieces about playing with the idea of different realities with different rules, getting together and mashing up and seeing what happens.
Very, very cool. That sounds awesome. That sounds another one I want to keep an eye out for.
Very intriguing.
All right, Ross. So I have to ask you this. So long-time listeners will know, of course, that Ross is Mr. RPG, but they'll also know, they will remember that Ross Watson is also Mr. Warhammer 40,000.
He first came on the scene to the D6G listenership
and
as Mr. 40K.
And this little tidbit of news did not actually surprise me that Ross Watson is still involved with some form of Warhammer 40,000 product. And I have to ask you, because I'm very excited about this product. You told me at Gen Con that you were working on Battlefleet Gothic Armada.
That's right.
So tell us about that.
I'm actually extremely proud and pleased to tell you guys that I got in touch with this group called Tindalos, who is making the game Battlefleet Gothic Armada, and they were very interested in having me write the story and dialogue for their game. Now, it is a translation of the board game Battlefleet Gothic into a video game. How do I put this? It's basically taking the board game and making a video game out of it.
Right.
It's not turn-based. It's real-time, but it's actually really interesting and exciting to see you give orders to your ships and see those ships carry them out in the space.
Now, is this what platforms is this coming out for, Ross?
Boy, that's a good question. We're pretty early in development right now.
I'll Google it.
My understanding is that it's absolutely going to be PC for sure. I don't know the other ones, unfortunately. I wish I could tell you more.
All right, no problem. So what have you? So you've been working on this story. What have you seen of it? What can you share with us about the game so far?
Well, these guys at $10 are just like me. They love Battlefleet Gothic. They love it to death. And anybody who's a fan of Battlefleet Gothic, which I presume you are.
Oh, yes. Oh, very much so.
Well, you remember that the main story of Battlefleet Gothic was the Gothic War.
Right.
Mm-hmm. This was the 12th Black Crusade, where Abaddon, the Despoiler, led a massive fleet of Chaos ships into the Gothic sector of the Imperium, intending to assault and capture these incredibly powerful ancient relics called the Blackstone Fortresses.
Yeah.
And that's what this story is about, where you get to play through the Gothic War.
Oh, cool.
And you get to interact with some of the characters of that particular conflict, like Lord Admiral Ravensburg. It's very, very awesome. I love the little twists and fun little bits. It's like taking it's like participating in a game that's about World War II, and you get to kind of pick and choose the really fun little battles and characters that are out there in that history. Of course, 40K is not history, it's fiction, but it has its own very rich setting to draw on, where you can pull out little things like this particular battle, this particular character, this particular ship. You can fight the Planet Killer. So
I have to say, I was looking at some of the... So it got some pretty good press at E3, which, of course, is the big video game conference back in June. And I have to say, the screenshots that came out of there are sick. I mean, they are so amazing. They look like artwork of Battlefleet Gothic. I mean, they just nailed it. They really, really nailed it. It looks fantastic, and it's full 3D. So like you're behind the deck of the Chaos battleship, just watching the turrets blaze away at a nearby Imperial cruiser, and it's just, I mean, wow! It looks just like. I mean, I hope it. I'm sure you've obviously seen early builds, and I hope it plays as good as it looks, because it looks. And they're really replicating. So have you really felt they've nailed the different? Are there going to be all four fleets in it? Do you know? Have you seen the other factions, or is it really Chaos versus Imperial? Or
I can't confirm.
Charlie the paddles, Charlie the paddles.
I know. But I have actually played several of the early builds, and as a Battlefleet Gothic fanatic, I love the ability to just sort of when I hover my mouse over the launch torpedoes, right, you can actually see the path that they'll take off the front of your ship, and just waiting for that to line up with the enemy blips is amazing. I'm like, oh yeah, here it is. Boom! Launch torpedoes every full spread. And just, it's so beautiful. And you get in between the enemy ships and launch your broadsides and do your teleport attacks, and all that stuff is in the game. I haven't yet been able to pull off a boarding action. I'm really trying. That's a tough thing even in the tabletop, but I'm going to put some work into that this week, see if I can get some boarding actions off.
Yeah, so the main pictures from E3 seem to be Chaos versus the Imperium, but there is some concept art on their Facebook page that shows orky bits, so I have hope.
I would not be surprised if orcs were in the game.
I have hope. So the only thing we haven't seen is Eldar yet, and I would feel like they need to be in there too. But Ross, that is so. I cannot. I'm even more excited that you, because there's not a lot of information out for it yet. Basically, it got announced, and then there's some few screenshots from E3. But the fact that you said that it's real time, but they're really trying to replicate the feel of the tabletop game. I think that bodes very, very well, and the graphic quality looks really, really good. So as long as the multiplayer / AI is pretty decent and the UI is pretty good, I think you should have. I think it sounds like you're gonna have a winner there. And I'm liking the guy writing the fluff, so I feel like that's gonna be good.
Well, thank you guys. It's still early days in the development cycle. I mean, I'm still like working on lists of things that occasionally they'll come back to me and say, well, I'm sorry, we decided this isn't in the game anymore. Right. So, don't take everything I said 100%. It may, evolve, and I don't want you guys to feel like I led you down the wrong path.
Sorry.
But as it stands in its current build, it's real time. It's got ships, ranging all the way up to battleships from your light cruisers and your frigates.
Yeah.
You can escort ships. You can put them in formations. You can carry out some pretty interesting tactics on the space battlefield by making a sort of a little mini fleet, if you will, of your frigates and kind of sending them up the side of the board to then come screaming in from, a flank with a full brace of torpedoes coming out of the front. So that's pretty fun and exciting.
Awesome.
And I've been enjoying playing the hell out of the build as it stands. So.
That is awesome. So I just put a picture in the doc there for you, Craig, so you could admire its awesomeness.
Very nice.
Very cool. So Ross, that's awesome. That sounds great. So as we get a little long here, Dan, I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about any other major projects. So what else should we know about that you're working on?
Well, let me see. In terms of 40K, there's also Warhammer 40,000 Regicide, which is on early access on Steam.
Oh, yes.
So you guys check that out.
So what's the premise behind Regicide?
Is that like
Is that chess?
the game from all of the books and stuff?
From Eisenhorn and Ravenor.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the name comes from, and it is a version of chess where you get to do some decidedly non-regulation things like throw grenades, use psychic powers, things of that nature. It's very beautiful. It's made by a company called Hammerfall, and they were involved in an awful lot of really great animation for cutscenes and things of that nature in games you probably have seen or heard about, Saints Row series and things of that nature. Right. These guys are really, really talented at making things look awesome. So when your Space Marine librarian slams his staff down on the ground, summons a psychic blast that turns an orc into basically a drift of ash, it's pretty awesome.
Nice. So this is kind of like the old battle chess game, except there's moves, there's non-regulation chess things you can do, and of course the death scenes are fully animated. Well,
that's true. There is a 50 mission campaign that I wrote.
Oh wow!
Which takes you on the journey of a group of blood angels who've been dispatched to a frontier world to kind of investigate the strange distress call that's been emanating from there, and they run into some trouble, which includes a band of bloodthirsty orcs, so the story progresses from there. I
got to go try the early access version. I'm looking at. I just shared another picture with Craig here. I'm looking at one of the screenshots, and I love the fact that it looks like a chessboard with different models,
but there's terrain.
Pieces. But I love that the terrain is not only there's terrain, but it's actually the old plastic bits.
It's the old plastic terrain.
It's the old plastic terrain, which is just awesome. So that little bit of nostalgia for the 40K players, like, oh look, there's the old tank traps,
the round, the tubular ammo crate.
Right, that's awesome. So.
And I'm not giving too much away to say that there's actually some really great missions where you get to play as a full death company of Blood Angels doing stuff on the planet. So
it seems like there's lots of Blood Angels there, which is always a win. So it looks really cool. I'm gonna have to check this out just for the death scenes alone. I mean, I always like battle chess, which is just chess, but really cool ways to kill the pawn with the queen or whatever. So this is an interesting concept, and I love I'm going to check out the little different rules. So, and the fact that you got a nice story in there, Ross, always is compelling to check it out. So,
thank you.
A good story always keeps you playing the game, I think. So good.
Appreciate it.
What else you got going on?
Well, the very last thing I need to mention is this project I'm working on called Strike Force V2.
Yeah.
Strike Force was a RPG supplement that came out for Champions back in the 80s. It was written by a guy called Aaron Alston. Have you ever heard of him?
I have not, but I've heard of Champions.
Well, Aaron Alston was a very influential guy in the industry for both role-playing games and novels, because he wrote a bunch of Star Wars novels, including all of the Wraith Squadron books.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. So Aaron's a very well-known guy who's basically he's worked on everything from D&D to Champions to just a bunch of stuff. He was a giant in the industry. Unfortunately, he died a couple years ago. And when he passed on, he was working on a new version of his first source book that was such a big splash, which was Strike Force. And so to honor Aaron, to honor his memory and help support his family, since his passing, I'm working in conjunction with Jason Walters of High Rock Press, and we're going to make this new version of Strike Force happen. We're involving some guys who are big in the Champions side of things, like Mike Serbrook, and some of the great friends of Aaron Alston, like Michael Stackpole. And we're going to make this new version kind of shine. It's going to tell the story of this great superhero campaign setting that Aaron Alston was running for 27 years, which is a amazing accomplishment.
Right.
And it has the distinction. Strike Force, the original, had the distinction of being one of the first books that ever gave advice on how to run a campaign. It identified different types of players. It talked about subplots. It even gave you a list of 10 ways to absolutely ruin your campaign. Right? It was one of the very first seminal books that kind of took a game master aside and said, "Here, let me tell you what you need to do." Right?
Right.
And we're taking a new stab at that. It's going to be a full color hardback book, so it's going to be a solid testament to Aaron and his work. And we're looking forward to getting that out sometime next year.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very cool. Busy beaver.
Exactly. Well, Ross, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on all your latest projects and all the details there.
Always exciting to talk to you, Ross, about all your projects.
Very much so. So we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll be back with a game review with Ross.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakelin and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. And our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. So this Friday was kind of a big deal. This past Friday, it was Force Friday, and everybody was showing up everywhere to check out the latest stuff for the upcoming Star Wars movie, and they were showing up at places at midnight, and there were people all dressed up and all the coolest stuff, and there was this BB-8 from Spiro that everybody wanted, and it looked awesome. And I was not there because I was landing on a plane, and we landed just a few minutes before that. And then I was trying to get to my car at an airport. So I actually kind of missed out on or not even kind of, totally missed out. It was very sad. I was living vicariously through what everyone was posting on Twitter and on Facebook, and all of my friends seemed to have a really good time. A lot of them were up crazy late to experience this, having a wonderful, wonderful time, and it was great to see all of it. Although it was really sad that I missed out, and I made the mistaken idea. I thought, okay, so I'm going to miss some of the cool stuff. Like there'll be stuff that everyone will buy, and poof, it will be gone in roughly 2 seconds. And I thought I'll still go check stuff out. And I didn't get to go on Saturday, and I didn't get to go and during the day Friday. So on Sunday I thought, okay, let's make a go of this. And I happened to pick Target, and I went to Target to look at the Star Wars selection of merchandise to see what cool things were available. Other than costumes, like the cheesy kind, the kind that you don't like to wear, like the ones that you get at the last minute at Halloween that are the cheesy, really not very cool costumes. And a whole bunch of little kids' t-shirts, because apparently the little kids weren't on board with the whole Star Wars movie yet. There was nothing. Actually, I guess I shouldn't say there was entirely nothing. There was some kind of mug thing full of candy that was shaped like Darth Vader. It kind of looked like Vader. I think it was Vader. It was Vader. And then there was a stormtrooper, and I want to say Boba Fett, but I could be wrong on that. Anyway, these mugs full with candy that were sitting there sort of abandoned and sad and lonely. There were also 2 pictures that you could hang on your wall that were sort of stylized images of R2-D2 and C-3PO. And other than that, it looked like the way the shelves look the day after Christmas when there is nothing left. Or, when they're about to change over from Halloween to Christmas and the Halloween candy has been picked through to the point that it's really the nasty stuff like bit of honey or something that like your mom ate when you were a kid that no reasonable child, nobody under the age of 75 will eat these days. That's the only stuff that was left. That's what the Star Wars aisle looks like in our local Target. So I was very disappointed because I feel like I missed out, but it's only a couple more months. Like the movie is almost here. It's coming soon. And I feel like they can't possibly leave all those aisles in Target completely empty. I mean, for crying out loud, there are giant cardboard TIE fighters and X-Wings fighting battles complete with laser bolts over your head hanging from the ceiling in Target. I mean, those can't be like just there for like a day, right? So they've got to be like doing more Star Wars stuff. So I missed Force Friday. I am so sad as a Star Wars fan that my work travel conflicted with my geekness and I missed out on this wonderful thing. But I am hopeful that unlike the Halloween candy that once it's gone, they will restock the shelves at Target. And I'm going to tell you, when they do that, when they finally put more stuff up there, I'm going to go and buy all the Star Wars things they've got.
Hey, you know what that sound means? That sound means the Vikings are coming, and not just any Vikings, but Vic. The Viking.
Vic the Viking. I don't know if normal Vikings used horns, but Vic does. And it's earth-shaking.
It is. Established in 1999, the War Store has been your go-to online source for miniature and board wargaming. And I have to say, though, the miniature wargaming supplies on the War Store are second to none. And what really makes the War Store fantastic, and they've done this now for over almost 16 years now, this idea that not only is it affordable, some of the best prices on the net, but also the service is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Neil and everybody over at the War Store always takes care of you, which is just something you don't see as much as you used to. And even better, you don't see them at the great prices the War Store offers, which really is two reasons right there that I do all my online shopping when it comes to gaming from the War Store. And, Craig, they have all the new hotness, whether it's the new stuff from X-Wing, from the Force Awakens sets.
Oh, the Force Awakens.
They got that. How about the Malifaux 2nd Edition starter boxes? They got that. Fantastic new dice from our friends at ChessX.
Yeah, there's always deals going on.
You name it, they've got it. And it's just, I love the navigation left-hand side. You can find your favorite miniature war game there, no problem. Your supplies, your paints.
So many different tabs, and anything could possibly be on any of those tabs. It's there.
It is. So head on over to thewarstore.com and get all your shopping done. And don't forget, the holidays are getting closer, so be ready.
That's
be ready.
Right. Start now. Start now.
I'm Rafe Hollywood Granger, and this is the Hollywood Minute.
All right. Welcome to another edition of the Hollywood Minute with your host, Rafe Hollywood Granger. Hey, you can follow me on the Twitter feed. That's the D6G Hollywood on Twitter. All right. 3 topics for you today. We're going to talk about Dragon Age Inquisition, X-Wing by Fantasy Flight Games, and D&D 5e. Let's start with Dragon Age. For some reason, I decided to crank up Dragon Age again on the PC, and I am having a blast. I don't know if it's because I'm in the right mood for it, or I don't feel rushed, or I don't know. I've been itching to play Lord of the Rings online, but logged in a couple times and then just didn't have the urge to continue, mainly because I think my kin that I used to play with is pretty much gone, so the social aspect to it was gone. And so then it became that just me running around with little Stoney there, just kind of doing these quests to level up with really no meaning. Versus I tried playing Dragon Age, and lo and behold, what do I have? I have a story to play. So I think that's what hooked me in, as I was in the mood for that. And then in the mood for like an MMO, but instead I'm finding the role-playing game to be the best. Now I've got it on very simple mode, which I like, and I have the other characters. I run with Iron Bull, Solus, and Varric, and what I do with them is I just auto-level them up. I don't know why, I just don't want to take the time. I just like doing my guy. My guy's name is Tibinicus in this one. He's a dwarf, of course. It feels like I'm about 3/4 of the way through the storyline, and I'm enjoying the side quests as well, doing a little bit of a completionist there, but not letting it ruin my day. If I don't feel like completing a zone, I don't. I go back and I do another storyline. Never done the romantic quests before, so that's new. I'm trying the romantic quest with the character Josephine. So, yeah, overall, I'm just having a really fun time with it. I'm really enjoying it. I think what I enjoy most is that I bought it a long time ago, and I'm not just not playing it, if that makes sense. I didn't just move on to greener pastures. I think after this, I might just jump right in and do The Witcher. Although by the time I finish Dragon Age, I bet you that Fallout will be hitting the screens. I think that comes out in November. Now, X-Wing by Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars X-Wing. I don't know what it is. I just have a hankering to play that. I'm hoping to meet up with Matthew Mangy from Vermont out there tomorrow at game night. Bust out the old X-Wing. I got my Space Rocks. I've got my mat. So I'm looking forward to playing a little game of that. Hope that works out. And let's see. Ooh, D&D 5e. Yeah, so really enjoying Horde of the Dragon Queen. There's a couple missions in there that I was a little bit nervous of. If you don't want to hear this, here we go, spoiler. I don't know, fast forward maybe 5 minutes, but then it'll be the end of the minute too. So this is the mission with the Roadhouse, and basically the gist of the mission is the caravan with all the loot has made like its 5th stop along the way, and the characters are supposed to find out that the wagons get unloaded, stored in a warehouse, there's a trapdoor, and it runs out to the swamps, and lizard men come in through the trapdoor and take the stuff and bring it out through the swamp. So the next mission from the swamp forward, those missions are great. But this particular mission, I was like, my crew's going to figure this out in about 5 seconds. And the characters that they gave, the NPCs, weren't very, very full with stuff. There was, a couple things that they gave up, and that was it. So sure enough, my crew figured it out in about 5 minutes, but I didn't have the next session prepared. I should have just moved them through the Roadhouse super quick and moved on to the next session, but I didn't have it prepared, so I wasn't that I was mindlessly trying to stretch it. I mean, they did take their time going through it, but they were at the end, they were frustrated because they felt like they were trying to get certain information, which they already got, meaning they got the information, so they succeeded, but they didn't know they succeeded because they got it so quickly. So they thought it was more complicated than it was. So I took that to heart, as well as Dave, I have each of them create their own magic item, and that magic item, they narrate it and they script it, and it can go through 5 different levels of powers. And Dave created it, and he had his whole backstory to it, but I missed that. I didn't know that he created a backstory. I only caught the fact that he had given it powers, so I kind of had given it to him. He found it in the storeroom, and he was like, really? I wrote up all that backstory, and there's going to be this lame in a corner? I don't have to kill a wizard or anything? And I was like, oh, crap, sorry, I missed that. So I kind of bungled that. So I felt like I had bungled a few things, and so I made a decision that I've never really run a campaign from a book before. I've always done it from my own head and my own characters. And when you do that, it's really easy to spitball. It's really easy to go off the cuff. I already have an image of what my NPCs are like, what they eat for breakfast, so to speak, versus when you're running somebody else's campaign. When they meet an NPC, like they met this character called Bog Luck, this half-orc, I didn't really have a good image of who he was or what he would do. And so you kind of have to keep consulting the book, which to me breaks not the fourth wall, I don't know what I'm trying to say, breaks the momentum of the role play. And I hate consulting the book. So I made a decision. I made a couple of decisions. Decision number 1 was I'm going to read the scenario and get a good gist of what's going on. Just a general direction. And then from there on forward, I'm just going to use my own character's strengths. In other words, I'm going to think of the NPCs, and I'm going to think of in my own head what they would do, what they would be like ahead of time. So I don't have to consult the book. So it's going to be the storyline, and it's going to be the characters, but then I'm going to give them their motivations, much like you would do in an acting class. And so I tried that, and it went a whole heck of a lot better. The last session we had was a small group. It was Ian, Andy, Steno, and then Craig joined in. He played a Dragonborn, and they were going through the swamps. It was a lot better. So, yeah, they had a fun time. I had a fun time running it. I kept to the script, but I was able to run the NPCs a lot better. It was funny. Steno's character died in the campaign being GM'd by Ian. Those are called the Crimson Cloaks, and our campaign over here is Timber's Traveling Troop, although the group doesn't want to use that name, but I think it's cool. That's Ian's character. But Steno's character died again, just by happenstance. They had followed these will-o-wisps off into the swamps, and the will-o-wisps shoot with these electrical energies, and they had brought Steno's character, who's a barbarian, a half-orc barbarian, down to 0. And when they do that, they have this thing called life drain. If you fail one saving throw, then you're instantly dead. Boom, that's it. No 3 saving throws. And so that happened with Steno's character. And I role-played it where he didn't know, so he was just kind of floating in the knee-deep water, and they were going over to rescue him and fight off the rest of the will-o-wisps, and then zombies came, and it was quite a battle. And so Andy's character, called Espada, who's a fighter, and those two pal around. He had gone into mourning and built a funeral pyre, not to burn, but to push out into the swamp. And then Steno's rolling a new character, and then all of a sudden he comes racing back in. And he goes, "Wait a minute! I forgot. When a half-orc is reduced down to 0, it's really reduced to 1." And I was like, 1 hit point. And I was like, all right, I'll allow it, because if you weren't down to 0, then you weren't, life drain didn't happen. So Steno's character died, but then I retconned it that he was really alive. So all in all, it was a good battle. Still enjoying Horde of the Dragon Queen. Looking forward to going to the next supplement after Horde of the Dragon Queen, which is the Rise of Tiamat. And then I'm looking forward to the new supplement I got, which is, I think, Demons from the Abyss or something like that. I tweeted it out. So that's what's going on here. If you want to write to me, you can write to me at the D6G Hollywood. That's Twitter, sorry. D6G Hollywood on Twitter, or Hollywood at the D6generation.com. All right. Until next time, happy gaming.
Hey guys, and welcome back. Now, as we said at the beginning of the show, we have Ross Watson, the King of Grimdark, with us, and one of the greatest new pieces of bling. It's not bling. It's the new hotness, I should say, that came out just before Gen Con, of course, which is Forbidden Stars, and we wanted to get that review out to you guys, and we thought, what better time than to do it while we have Ross, the King of 40K Fluff, with us on the show.
Indeed. Now, the game, as Craig said, this game just came out in July, literally a couple of weeks or two before Gen Con. And I have played it now, I want to say like 4 times. And Craig has played it with me once. And Ross, have you had a chance to play the game at all? Have you seen it? Have you gotten, what do you know about it?
I've seen it, but I have not actually played it. But it looks fantastic, I got to say.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we'll do our normal full detailed review. And then we'll give our final thoughts. And Ross, at the end, we're going to engage with you as we go. So please feel free to ask questions, jump in here, make sure we're being clear to someone who's never played before. And then at the end, we're going to ask you your opinion on how excited you are to play it, just based on our wacky description of the game here.
Sure.
So let's start off with the overview of Forbidden Stars. Now, this game, as we said, just came out this year, July 2015. It is indeed designed for 2 to 4 players. According to the box, it should be completed in about 2 to 3 hours. That's probably true once everybody knows the rules. If everybody does not know the rules, I would plan for 4 hours. It's one of those Saturday afternoon, you're going to play a nice long game of, take over the universe, kind of thing. The suggested retail price is $99.99. So Craig, you get to save that penny.
That penny can be a deal breaker.
And we talk about what comes in the box in a minute. We will let you decide if that is a good value or not. But let's talk a little bit about the fluff here. I mean, it is set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and you get to play one of 4 of the well-known factions in the 40K universe. And Craig, do you want to read to us in a very well, actually, Ross, you're pretty good at this role-playing thing. Do you want to read this paragraph
Ross
here?
Do it.
Give us a dramatic, grimdark reading here of this fluff paragraph right out of the rulebook.
All right. Distant stars and lost planets seemed to hang motionless in the void before Ulysses Ethanos, but he knew better. The machinery of the galaxy churned ever onward, inexorable and eternal. In his mind's eye, the rogue trader could see the expanse before him, filled with barges bursting with conscripted laborers, shrine ships gilded with the icons of the Imperial Creed, and grand cruisers of the naval battle fleets. Now that the warp storms had abated, the sector populations and resources were to be returned to their rightful service of the Imperium. Inevitably, that would mean conflict. Ulysses knew that, surely, word of this long-forgotten sector would soon reach Xenos and heretics alike, if it had not reached them already. Horrors would descend upon the realm, each sowing only death and destruction in their wake, each seeking to turn the benighted worlds to their own ends. War was coming to the once-lost Heracon cluster, and Ulysses Ethanos knew that the price for these forbidden stars would be paid in blood.
In blood! See, and you know all those pronunciations are correct because Grimdark expert.
Right.
That's right.
I noted at least 4 places I would have stumbled on that.
So yes. So basically, we're in a I think we're in a reasonably known. Ross, is this sector known or unknown? I don't know.
The Heracon cluster is. I am not familiar with that, so
I think it's
I'm
another
assuming that's a brand new one. Yeah, I think that's their sandbox.
So it's probably a new sandbox, but there are some worlds on the map you might recognize if you are familiar with Warhammer 40,000. Also, so you're basically going to play one of 4 of the major factions included in the box. You get your Space Marines, your Orcs, your Eldar, and your Chaos Space Marines. I got my daughters to play this by basically saying it was fantasy in space, so they tried it out because they're more fantasy fans than sci-fi. And you're basically trying to, instead of take over the universe, you're trying to capture some objective tokens, and we'll get more about that in a bit. But I do love, as you heard from that paragraph that Ross just read, there is some good amount of fluff included in the game on both the player cards and in the rule books, and so it really does ooze that Warhammer 40,000 universe. So if that's so they really got a nice amount of that in here, and so I think this will appeal to 40K fans, but I also think it'll appeal to people who may don't know that, but want to try some new cool mechanics. So let's talk about what's in the box. So, Craig, what does it sound like when you open a box of Warhammer 40,000 goodness sucked into a board game?
That was the Grimdark coming out of the
Nice. I like the escaping Grimdark. So inside the box you get now, and this is now a patented Fantasy Flight Games trick, which I love. You get 2 actual rule books, full color with illustrations and everything. One of the rule books is the Learn to Play book, which walks you through the entire game, as they've been doing now all their newer games. What I like about though is all the rules are it's not like a dumbed down version of the game. It's constructed in a way that you can learn to play while you read through it. The other book is the reference book, which is all the major glossary and major rules and mechanics. Like, for example, if you want to look up combat or what happens to the routed units, you go right to the R section of the book, and there's the routed units section. So it's keeps the game moving fast. I love this, and I wish more companies would copy this. I do recognize it costs a little more money because you got to make 2 books. So I get that only the bigger companies can pull this off, but nice job, Fantasy Flight. I really like that. It almost allows me to completely forgive you for any lack of box control whatsoever in your games.
Russ, I just want to point out something really quick. You guys like the fluff of this. That's probably because 2 of the guys that wrote the fluff of this were part of my team.
Yes.
At Fantasy Flight, Tim Flanders and Tim Huckleberry.
Oh, Tim Huckleberry.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Tyranid Tim Huckleberry. So that's probably where you're getting all that awesome fluff from, is those 2 guys.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, Ross. So it's all chock full of that, and that's what I think is what Fantasy Flight really does so well now is they marry that awesome Warhammer 40,000 universe with really great board game rules. But more about that in a little bit. And then they also chock full of components. So let's talk about those. So you get. And because it's an FFG game, you get lots of cool cards. You get 112 combat cards across 4 factions, all full of great artwork. Fantasy Flight's got a huge stable now of fantastic 40K art. It just looks great. They got 32 event cards across 4 factions. They got 20 order upgrade cards across 4 factions. So lots and lots of cards. Tons of tokens. You get 12 what they call system tiles, which basically, so it's a modular game board, right? So these tiles come together to form the board. I think they're beautiful. It's a very unique art style. Craig, what did you think of the art style of the tiles?
I thought it was very cool. It was very reminiscent of the sorts of star maps that are hidden in the background
Yes.
of a lot of 40K stuff, including like the 40K role play books and things like that. It's a very sort of a meshing of a star map, but at the same time the old maritime charts. It's really cool.
It was very evocative of some of the old Rogue Trader era 40K books, I thought, but in full color. So it was a really cool way to do it. I really like that a lot. It definitely captured the 40K feel of sort of sci-fi yet retro in the way they do that. You get 16 custom dice, so you're getting a bunch of these bright blue D6s with cool bolter icons on them and skull and shield icons and the Imperial Eagle on them, so they're really cool looking dice. You get 4 dials. I think that's a law now in Fantasy Flight
it's a
land.
Fantasy Flight game.
It's got to have dials, right?
Yep.
You get some really nice player mats, and the player mats are really cool. They're beautiful artwork. Also, key reference material on the player mats. The back of the player mats is full of fluff. Each player mat, one for each faction, has a nice long couple paragraph fluff about why that faction is in the specific system. It's not just the Space Marines, it's the Ultramarines. It's not just the Orcs, it's the Evil Sons. It's not just the Eldar, it's the Iendan, right? So it's specific factions with their rules tweaked for those specific factions. So which is really cool.
Yeah.
And on the back there, the objective tokens, which really in the game, right? The objective tokens are how you win. You just got to find these cardboard tokens, and you win if you get them. The back of the tokens all have cool artwork on them, and this all ties to the back of your faction card, and there's this bit of fluff about what the objective is. You can ignore it, but it's kind of cool when you capture one, you flip it over, and you realize, I've just found, if you're the Eldar, you found the souls of the Ancient Ones, or something really cool like that ties into the fluff of your faction. Don't need to, but it's just one of those things that kind of turns it into a story if you want to.
They went a little deeper than they needed to make a really cool, fluffy game.
Yeah, exactly. They went farther than they had to, for sure. It's really cool. Then, of course, here's what makes it awesome. You get tons of plastic. So you get 35 plastic structures, which are divided into 3 categories. Cities, which look like little hive cities, from if you remember the Necromunda artwork. You get factories, and you get bastions.
Bastions.
The bastions look just like the 40K model shrunk down to size. It's awesome.
They are. All of the models look crazy good.
And these guys are all neutral, and you put tokens under them to represent who's built them. So the Orcs can build a bastion someplace, or the humans, the Space Marines can build a city, and then later can be captured and transfer ownership. But then you also get 105. So you get 35 plastic structures for buildings. Then you get a different 105 units divided into the 4 factions, color-coded plastic for the different races, the Orcs, the Eldar, and each of these tokens, there's 2 ground units, which are represented by different kinds of flags. But then there is faction-specific tanks. So the Orcs have little battle wagons. The Space Marines have little Land Raiders. The Eldar have grav tanks. Then you go up to the Titan levels, and they all have some kind of Titan Stompa, something like that. And then they also have 2 spacecraft, a smaller and large spacecraft that look like they're shrunken down right out of Battlefleet Gothic. You got the various 2 Eldar ships, 2 different Chaos ships, 2 different Space Marine battle barge type ships, and you also get 2 different of the Orc ships. It's really quite a collection. Craig, what did you think? And the Space Marines have little flight stands too, so they stand up and kind of hover around the board. What did you think of the collection of plastic, Craig?
Before I played, I didn't understand why people were complaining about the flags instead of the little guys, but now I get it. Because if you had little Space Marines and little Space Marine Scouts, it would be even cooler. But that being said, the fact that they went in the direction of those flags, once you take that as a given, even the flags look really cool. The Space Marine, the flag that represents a Space Marine is a big chapter banner coming out of a bunker. Very cool stuff. The Land Raiders, the detail on the little plastic models is crazy cool. The Warlord Titans look great.
The Land Raiders and the Titans look like they came right out of Epic.
They really do.
And the battleships all look almost identical to the Battlefleet Gothic stuff. It's really they did a great job on making those very. They look exactly like what they're supposed to look like.
Exactly. Yeah. It was really, really cool. I really enjoyed it. That whole aspect of it a lot.
And I think the flag's an interesting design choice. But when you look at the board and actually play it through, you feel like you're a general looking on one of those old boards, World War II era, which is what 40K is, right? It's sci-fi.
Some guy
World
with
War
a stick pushing the flag
and it
around.
looks like little flags where you have models for your armor and models for your ships, which kind of like what they used to have back then. So given that and sort of the retro style map, it definitely has that sort of feel of like, that kind of what the admirals might tactically do in sort of that retro sci-fi that is the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So I think the whole look really, really works, and I really love the components. And as a component, I'm a shameless lover of all things bling in board games, and this is right up my alley, of course. But it just looks fantastic on the table, and you can't help but walk by and go, "What are you playing over there? That looks awesome." Is that Epic and Battlefield Gothic all merged together in a board game? What is that about? So it's definitely a beautiful, beautiful looking game. And I think for the price point of $100, I don't know, Craig, what do you think? Are you getting a good value for all that plastic and that artwork?
I think they've picked the right choice, the right price, because I think $5 cheaper and it's a no brainer. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably right where it should be.
Yep.
I mean, you get an awful lot for $100. I think maybe 5 years ago it wouldn't have been $100. Yeah. But we are where we are, and I think $100 is more than fair for everything you're getting, and the quality of the card stock, and the quality of the board stock, and everything else included.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you set this game up and get it rolling here. So I'm going to walk through that process now. Actually, setting the game up's not too bad. You do want to have some. There's really no assembly to do anything when you first open the box up for the first time, except sticking your flight bases into your ships, which you could easily do as you deploy them or build them. So really, there's not a lot of prep work except punching out the tokens. You do probably want to organize a little bit of Plano. I do that all the time for all my games, especially Fantasy Flight games, because there's really no way to store them back in the box with what comes with them, unfortunately. That's the one ding against them. But I think for the value what I get in the box, it's a small complaint. But let's talk about your setup. So first thing you got to do is choose your faction. So when you choose your faction, you're going to want to collect all the components that go with that faction. So all your plastic, you actually have a bunch of different decks for your faction. You got a pile of combat cards that actually divides out into your starting deck of combat cards, and then the rest of your deck are combat cards you can actually buy and upgrade your fighting deck. You're also going to get a pile of event cards just for your faction, and you're going to get a pile of order upgrade cards, which are going to basically improve the kind of orders you can give throughout the game. So you want to make sure that you lay these cards out next to your player mat in such a way that you don't get confused between your current hand of combat cards and the ones you need to buy later to improve your capabilities. As I describe these rules, by the way, longtime Fantasy Flight Games fans will see some analogies to some of their other games. In particular, the order system is reminiscent of Game of Thrones or the improved version or the more in-depth version you found in the StarCraft board game. Mm-hmm. And really, a lot of comparisons get drawn between this and the StarCraft board game if you're a fan of that. So you might recognize some of this stuff. So you're going to get your starting tokens, put them all next to your stuff. You got to figure out the first player, which is easy enough to do. Then you're going to build your game board. Now, this is sort of like a mini game. What I really, really like, Craig, about this, and you didn't see this, but in the Learn to Play book, they have a complete setup of how to lay the tiles out the first time you play and where to put your starting forces.
Of course.
Yay.
I think this is really, really good for the first time players, because if you don't know any strategy about the game, you never played the game before, you could really screw yourself on initial force disposition or laying out the universe. So what they've got here is a pre-laid out board with pre-laid out faction locations for all of them, and it's cut apart in such a way that says if you've only got 2 players, play Chaos versus Space Marines and do this, and lay this stuff out this way. If you do 3 players, add in the Orcs and do this. If you're doing 4 players, add in the Eldar and do this. And so you're guaranteed that you have a balanced setup. You can actually play the game this way every time. Of course, they get a little older after a while, so there's, of course, a fully modular way to build the board. I'm going to go through that in a second. But I really love this. You don't see it very often. Like if you look at Rune Wars, right, when you're building that Rune Wars board for the first time, you're kind of guessing, right, if this is a good call or not. You don't really know. So I really like the fact that you're kind of going in with a balanced board. All right, but let's talk a little bit about how the game board's constructed. So if you're playing a full-time with advanced players, because I think this is a pretty slick system. So the first thing you're going to do is everybody gets some tiles. So every player gets their starting home system tile, which has got their faction logo on it. So that's fixed. But those are double-sided. So you can choose between 2 slightly different versions of a starting home sector. Yeah. And by the way, I should say that these tiles are divided into sort of 3 things. Each tile counts as a system. Then each tile is broken up into 4 sections, and there are 2 kinds of sections. There can either be world sections, which is a section with a planet floating in it, or there could be what they call void sections, which are planets without worlds in it. And the thing
not planets without worlds.
Thanks. Sectors.
Sectors without worlds.
Yes. Worldless sectors, right? So you've got some spots that are just space voids and some spots that are worlds. The thing to remember about this game, and I got this wrong the first time I played it, is that spaceships can only go in voids, and not spaceships, ground forces, can only go on worlds, right?
You know, what's funny is the Iandan craft world counts as a world area.
It does, yes.
Which I think is great.
Yeah. It is cool. It is fluffy that your home world for the Eldar is actually a craft world, which is really, really cool in the art. So then what you're going to do is you're going to deal out 2 tiles to each player. And so the size of the game board is going to scale with the number of players in the game. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go clockwise from the first player, putting tiles down. Now, a couple of things happen before you start putting tiles down. You also get, on the back of your player mats, is what you call your starting forces, and it tells you which plastic to start. It's asymmetric. So the Eldar get different starting forces than the Marines, get different starting forces than the Orcs, get different starting forces than Chaos, right? Which is pretty cool. You also get to set those dials I mentioned. Each player's got a dial. That dial tracks your what's called materials, which is basically the money in the game. And so those all start at 6. And then also what you're going to do is you're going to get these victory objectives. Now, each player is given 2 objectives of all of his opponents. So, for example, if Ross, Craig, and I are playing, and Ross is Chaos and Craig is Eldar, I would get 2 Chaos tokens and 2 Eldar tokens from Craig and Ross. And then if I was playing Orcs, Ross would get the Eldar and the Orcs tokens, right? And then as we put these tiles down, these tiles have on them little shapes that indicate where the objectives go. And when I put a tile down, I must also put down opponents' objectives on that tile. So as I'm placing tiles, I'm not only dictating the shape of the universe and where certain planets are, and by the way, each planet's got different icons on it with different kinds of resources and stuff. So I'm kind of positioning where the good planets are and the not so good planets are, but I'm also putting objectives on there. They're going to indicate where Ross and Craig have to get to win the game. Meanwhile, they're doing the same to me. Now, also, after I put my tile down, I can put any amount of my starting forces, based on deployment rules, on these tiles as well. So I'm putting a tile down, I'm putting down objectives for my opponents on those tiles, and then I'm also putting down models on those. So I'm building the board, I'm building how the objectives are going to work, and this is all known. And then eventually we're going to put our starting tiles down. So it's really sort of interesting. And that's why I really like that this game has a default layout that's balanced, because you can, once you guys all know what you're doing, you could imagine some really interesting, complicated, really nasty deployments, but you could also imagine a newbie player kind of throwing away some easy objectives to a veteran player if he or she didn't know what they were doing. But I really like this idea of how this set up. Does that all make sense, Ross? Did you follow that?
Yeah, I'm following along. So if I put down a board tile and it's got an objective for someone else on it, I have to put that on there. So I have to make really important decisions during setup, which I think is really good.
Exactly right. You don't get to put any of your own objectives down at all.
Right.
So,
it's only the other people, only other players.
That's right. And to win the game, by the way, you must capture a number of objective tokens equal to players in the game. So if you're doing math on this, there's going to be, like in a 4-player game, there's going to be 6 of your objective tokens out there, right? And you only need to capture 4 of them. So you don't need them all, but you need to get a large number of them. And so you get to choose as the game progresses which ones look easier to get and which ones look harder to get. And what's also interesting about this is as you put a tile down, you also must put your starting forces down. And now you're thinking about 2 things when you're putting starting forces down. 1, am I putting them in a good spot to go grab that objective Craig just put down? But 2, am I really not going to put anybody on this tile because it's a crappy tile, but I was forced to put down 2 objectives. So let's say there's no good resources on these worlds, but I had to put Ross's objective on there and Craig's on there, and I don't want to put any forces on it because there's nothing worth holding there for me. I'm also throwing those objectives up for easy grabs for you guys. So it's like, do I do that or do I defend them? So there's some really tough choices right off the bat in this game, which I really find interesting. So that's setting the board up. There's one other part of board setup. So after we go around the table clockwise and keep putting tiles down until everybody's got all the tiles down and all of our starting units are on the board and everybody's objectives are out there, then we go in reverse order. So let's say it was Craig, me, Ross doing deployment. Then we start reverse order. Ross goes, there are a bunch of these long, thin warp storm tokens.
Yes.
And in reverse order then, Ross picks one warp storm token and he puts it somewhere on the board on a dividing line between 2 sectors. So remember, these sector tiles are square. Each of these sector tiles is divided into 4 little sections that are either worlds or voids. But now you're able to put these warp storm tokens along the edge, and while that warp storm is there, you may not pass through the warp storm. So Ross is going to pick one set of tiles to essentially make them an impassable door between the 2 of them. Then I get to put one down, and then Craig gets to put one down. So we're going to block out some number of tiles that get to move. But the neat thing about the game is as the game progresses in each of the end rounds, the warp storms will move. Ooh. So initially, it looks like you're safe or you can even get boxed in, but then later those warp storms will move, and you have some small amount of influence on where they go, and it can really get interesting there. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics happening. One, you don't know how the board's going to look. Two, you don't know where your objective is going to go. And three, the warp storms will move around. And a minute ago, you had an easy way to get someplace, and all of a sudden, that whole path is shut down. Which is
I thought the warp storms were a great mechanism that they added in that serves to change the board every turn.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it also gives you that hope of a kind of a Hail Mary. Oh my God, how am I going to stop him? Boom! Oh, there's a warp storm there. But also is very evocative of the fluff. And you feel
yes.
that like this is an area where the warp is slowly withdrawing, but it's still whipping around, messing with you.
Yeah. and Ross, you'll like this. There's cool little fluff nods to each of the factions. So the factions are asymmetric in a bunch of different ways. Mm-hmm. First, all of their models not only look different, but have slightly different stats. So, secondly, each faction has their own race ability. We'll get to that in a minute. But third, the order upgrade decks and the combat cards are all faction specific, and they're not all the same. So, for example, one of the order upgrades, which only exists for Chaos, is they can upgrade their move order, which allows them to move their ships through a warp storm.
Yeah.
Which is extremely fluffy for Chaos.
Yeah, it is.
It makes total sense, but it costs them a lot of research to do that, and if they do that, they're giving up other research, which is really cool, too. So there's neat stuff
Only
like
their
that.
ships, too, though.
Yeah,
so I'm kind of confused about the value of that.
Well, you could go in and start establishing a foothold early. There's a lot of but it's really interesting. It's interesting how this all works, though, because basically there's all kinds of cool faction-specific fluff that shows up throughout the game, and so it's really hard to put your finger on it and say their one faction ability is better than someone else's, because it all comes together in a combination that you don't always see every battle either, which is really interesting. All right, so the last bits of setup, really, we're almost done here. There's also a track on the side of the board that tracks the turn it is. So the game does have a turn limit of 8 turns, which you can get to, but the game will immediately end if someone gets the victory objective of number of objectives each equal to player counts. And then that's pretty much it. You're going to have your decks already sorted out, which you already did. You're pretty much ready to rock. The board's laid down. Our starting forces are already on it. That's part of deployment. The warp storms are there. We're ready to start the game of Forbidden Stars.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about let's talk about how this works. So really, there is also a giant first player token, and so the first player who did the first deployment is also first player for round 1, but that will also move around the table. All right, so let's talk about. We already mentioned the objective. Remember, the objective is, and remind your players of this when you're first teaching it. The objective is to get those objective tokens. The objective, there is no victory point track. There's no points for killing dudes. There's no if you control more of the galaxy than anybody else, you win. It's all about collecting those objective tokens. And by the way, once you capture the objective token, it's yours to keep forever. So if you can end an entire turn on a planet with your token on it, you take that token and no one can take it from you. So over time, once you get for a 3-player game, you get 3 of those, you win. So it's not about holding certain planets. It's about getting to a planet, holding it for one turn, capturing the objective, and then moving on.
It's like you take a trophy or like an ancient relic or something. Yeah, once you have that, it's yours.
You've captured an ancient manufacturing facility, got what you needed out of it, rescued some people, whatever, right? All right, so let's talk about the turn. The turn is really 3 main phases. There's the planning phase, the operation phase, and the refresh phase. So what's that about? Well, it's pretty simple. So each player's got a pile of these hexagonal tokens called order tokens. There are 2 of each type, and they have cool little icons on them. The back of the token has your cool faction logo. Those are all the same. And the front of the tokens have different order type icons, and there's 2 of each order. Okay, what we're going to do during the planning phase is the first player, Craig, is going to pick a system. Remember, this is an entire tile. In the center of each tile, there's a little gold hexagon that happens to be the exact same size as an order token. Graphic design. And so Craig is going to pick one of his order tokens, and he's going to place it face down in one of the systems on the little golden thing. Then I am going to go and do the same with my order, and Ross is going to go and do his order, and we're going to keep going around, not knowing what each other are putting down for orders, but only knowing where we're putting down orders, and keep going around until each of us has placed 4 orders. Now, a few things about this. You can only put orders in systems that you have plastic or in systems adjacent to where you have plastic. So you can't just put them anywhere on the board. Secondly, if I put an order in a system where there's already an order, I put my order on top of the other player's order, or it could be on top of my own order. So I might put an order in my system. I might put several orders in the same system. I want to build maybe there. I want to advance in there, whatever. Craig might put an order to attack on his system, and I see that, so I put an order on top of that says I'm going to build units first to defend against his attack. That kind of thing. So you stack the orders up. This is very similar to the older board game StarCraft. So you're kind of...
Very, very similar.
Yes.
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And I really like this mechanic.
Yeah.
It's similar to also when placing the orders in the Game of Thrones game, but they didn't stack up in that game, which I really like to stack up.
Right. Yeah.
So after we put all our orders down, we've locked them in, now the operations phase come where we start resolving the orders. Okay, and we talk about this, I'll talk about how the orders work. Right? So now what's going to happen is, starting in player order again with Craig, he's going to pick one of the stacks of orders in any system where he's got one of his tokens on the top of the stack. He's going to flip it over, show the table, hey, look, guys, I played a deployment order. And he's going to do whatever that order allows him to do, immediately resolve the order, and then we're going to move on to the next player. I will then pick one order, resolve it, and then Ross will pick an order, resolve it, and we'll keep going around until all the orders are resolved.
Now, if there's orders stacked on top of each other, you have to go with the one that's on top.
That's
right?
correct. And it's possible that all of my orders are blocked out. So sometimes what happens is, I might have put an order in one system, Craig put an order on top of that, I put an order in that system, Ross put an order on top of that. It gets to my turn, all of my orders are locked. I can't get to them. I just have to pass and wait till But if there is one of my tokens on the top somewhere, I must resolve it. Now, there is a nuance to this. So when I resolve an order, if I turn it over and say, you know what, I was going to do a move order here, but your fickle actions over there, Ross, I didn't expect to have happen, and now the guys that were going to move can't because of X, Y, and Z, or I don't feel like moving them anymore because I realize you built a giant armada there. So what I'm going to do instead is not resolve this order, and I'm going to choose to put it on top of my event card stack. And what that basically means, so whenever you take an order off and choose not to resolve it, it goes on your event card stack, and at the end of the turn, based on the number of orders on the event card stack, you're going to get some number of event cards to be able to choose from to execute. More about that in a bit. Event cards, just to understand at the moment, they're super cool. So if you don't get to resolve an order, it's kind of nice to have that option for the event card stack. And only by putting orders on top of the event card stacks do you get the full effects of the event cards. So let's talk about the different orders, because the third phase of the game is pretty simple. It's the refresh phase, which is just a bunch of cleanup. I'll talk about it later, but it's not very exciting. So really, the meat of the game is resolving the orders, right? So let's talk about this. So let's talk a bit about the four types. There's a deploy order. The deploy order is super simple. The symbol on it is a factory with an arrow on it, and it basically allows you to build more structures and build more troops. Now,
troops and then a structure.
Yes, the rule is troops and then a structure. So you must build troops first. So what that basically means is you can't build a factory and then troops in the same system, because unless you have some special rules, because basically the factory troops must be built first in this phase. So I'm going to say
expanding into a new territory mainly is a two-turn or a two-order operation.
Yes.
See, the orders have particular things they can do, but they have to be resolved in order.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
So, and the first thing you have to do with deploy is purchase units, and then the second thing is the purchase.
Exactly right. So to purchase units is pretty simple. On my player mat, there are a list. Now, if you remember StarCraft, you remember this is pretty complicated. This is very simple in this game, which I love. So to purchase units, it's really, really simple. On your play mat, there is a list of all the cool units you can build and little pictures that match the plastic bits you have. Units are plastic bits. You can build, when you build buildings, you can build different kinds of city, faction. I'll get to this in a second. Let's talk about units. So I can build any of those plastic I want. There's a little green gear with a number in it, and that is the cost in what they call materials, and that's how much on your dial you turn your dial down to build that unit. So you might see that to build a scout is 2 materials, and to build a space marine it is 3 or 4 materials. I can't remember, but some number of materials. So you just turn your dial down and you spend it, but there are other restrictions. So next to the material, there is also looks like a bright yellow Space Marine shoulder pad, and there's a number inside of it that indicates what command value you must have also to build the unit. So, for example, the cheaper units require a command value of 0, and better units require a command value of 1. Command value is really simple. It's the total number of cities you own. So the whole job of building cities is to increase your command value. Better command value lets you build more complicated units. So if I'm going to build a Space Marine instead of a Scout, I need a command value of 1 and 3 materials. So I need to have built a city, right? Once I don't spend the city. Just by having a city, I'm now command value 1. I can build anything with command value 1 or less. I get 2 cities out there. Now I can build command value 2 stuff. 3 is 3. And some of the really cool stuff like Titans requires a command value of 3, for example. So basically, I'm going to make sure I've got the command value. I'm going to spend the cost. Some of the other super fancy units have a little symbol of a forge hammer on it. There is a special resource you can collect, more about that in a bit, that allows you to build those units. So for those units, you got to pay the material cost. you got to pay a forge hammer, and you must have the right command value as well. But basically, it's really simple. You look to make sure you got the right number of cities, you pay your materials cost, you pick up your plastic, and you put it anywhere in the system that the unit's allowed to go that is a friendly or neutral world or void, and has the system, and the system has to be where the order played, and the system has to have a factory, right? One other limit, each world has some skulls on it, which indicates the maximum unit count. That also indicates how many units a factory can build in one given order. So those limits are pretty simple. Really, most of the time you're just worried about materials. Do I have enough materials to build the right units, right? And you put the units out there in the system. You can either build spaceships or ground units. Doesn't matter as long as you got space in your system to put them there. Go for it, right?
Yep, so far.
It's pretty simple. There are some deployment limits. The deployment limits on world is equal to the number of skulls under the world, and the deployment limit in a void is always 3. All right. That's deploy order. Pretty simple. The other thing you can do with the deploy order after you build units is you can build a building. Same deal with buildings. They're right there on your card, even though everybody has access to the same buildings. And they tell you the cost for the building, and you just pay that cost of materials, put the plastic building out there, and you've got a little piece of token you can put under it to show that it's a Space Marine building or an Orc building or whatever. And again, the reason you build a city is to increase your command value. The reason you build a factory is that's now a system you can build units in. And the reason you would build a bastion is a bastion essentially counts as a really kick-butt defensive unit. So it basically counts as a full combat unit. It can fight in battles. It can never be routed, which makes it super tough. And it protects you from orbital bombardments, which makes it really awesome. So bastions are great. The problem you have is that every world can only have one structure on it, regardless of type. So you can't have a world with a bastion on it, and a factory on it, and a city on it. There is an Eldar exception to that, but in the core rules you can't do that. Unless you got a card or something, you can't do that.
So you got to choose carefully.
You got to choose carefully. And the thing is, when enemies invade, they don't destroy the city or the factory, they just capture it. So the only thing that can die in battle is a bastion because it actually gets fought. So those, once you build a city there, that's going to be over the city on it for the rest of the game. There's no one can change that unless there's a special card I don't know about. So basically, you're choosing for the table basically when you build a city someplace, which is interesting. Oh, the other thing that's really tough though, Ross, is 9 times out of 10, that cool planet where you really want to build a factory because it's got really a lot of skulls on it and crank them out is also someone else's key objective, and now you just made that planet even juicier. Because now I'm giving out. I just built this, and Ross is like, "Ooh, I'm playing Eldar. That cool factory is now on a planet where that's good. Got my Eldar objective on it. I even want to go there more." Which is really interesting. So that's the deploy order. Basically, build stuff. Pretty simple, right? All right. The next order you can give is the strategize order, and this order's icon is a couple of cards on it, which is great because that's what you're basically doing. In the strategize phase, this allows you to buy cards for either your combat deck or buy upgrade cards to make your order cooler. Okay? So basically what's going to happen is you've got this deck of combat cards. We'll get to combat in a second. That have, it's 10 cards. It's always 10 cards. And it's 5 different cards in 5 pairs, right? And like, for example, the Orcs have some Gretchen in there. The Orcs have some Ard Boys in there. They have Shooter Boys. These cards all come up. We'll get to combat in a second. But basically during the strategize phase, you can look through your deck of upgrade cards for combat, pick 2 of the same card, pay the cost in the corner, and the cost in the corner is, again, those same materials that you use to build units, and there might be a city requirement as well in terms of command. So it might say 1 command and 3 materials, and you can buy the WOG card, which is really, really cool. And what I do when I buy that then is I replace 2 cards from my normal combat deck. I take them out, 2 matching cards, and I replace them now with these 2 new cards. So my combat deck is always 10 cards. It's always 5 different cards in pairs, and I'm just switching the pairs, the not-so-good pairs, with cool, newer pairs.
Okay, so the deploy order allows me to make troops.
Yes.
The strategize order helps me make those troops do better.
That's right. Exactly right. Now, the second part of strategize, so in strategize, I can buy a new pair of cards to replace in my combat deck to make my troops better in combat, or I can also buy an upgrade card for orders. And what these do is I look through this is a separate deck of cards. I look through that deck, and I can buy one of them that I leave face up in front of my player mat, and it now says my movement order or my deploy order is better. So the Orcs, for example, have one that I forget what it's called, but it's Build 'em Fasta. And it basically means when you've got that card face up, your deploy order allows you to build 1 more guy than the planet normally allows or something like that.
Nice.
So there's different cards like that. They're all faction specific, and they make your orders better. So if you remember StarCraft, this is like the Golden Orders, which are really cool. Or Game of Thrones with his golden orders also, which give you a little better, the orders with stars. This is like giving yourself a permanent star option on all of that one order type you just upgraded. The other cool thing about Strategize is that token then also goes on top. Even if you resolve it and use it properly, it always goes on top of your event deck to give you an event card as well. So Strategize is really doing a couple things. It's improving your combat abilities, it's potentially improving your order capabilities, and it's setting you up for a cool event card. So it's sort of a very strategic move for the future.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's that one. That's probably the most complicated one to explain.
Yeah.
The next one is Dominate. So Dominate is basically oppressing the system, the citizens of the system, which is everybody wants to do that.
No, it's not oppressing them. Yes, it's urging them to be more productive.
Yes. So I should probably take this moment to describe the iconography below a given world. So throughout the system, there are worlds, and each world has this cool little, very stylish, grimdark scroll going along the bottom. And on this grimdark scroll...
It's grimdark because there's skulls there.
Yes. On this grimdark scroll, there are sort of three different areas of iconography. The first area is a little green cog that matches the materials icon with a number in it. And that tells you how many materials your little material disk is going to go up should you control this planet at the end of the turn. That happens every turn automatically. You don't have to do anything special. You're going to get that money as long as you got some plastic on that planet. So, good news there. The next part of the scroll is a section in the middle where there's a number of skulls, and we talked about those two. The skulls are just basically maximum plastic count you can have in the world.
Right.
And then on the right of that, you may or may not see some number of what look like wax seals with icons in them. So these wax seals are what you get should you do a Dominate order in this system. Okay? So if you do a Dominate order in that system, you get the icons and the wax seals for every planet that you control, every planet you have plastic on. So I might control 2 worlds in a system. I do a Dominate order. On one world, I might get a wax seal of a forge hammer. Right?
Stop.
Yes.
Hammer time.
Exactly. That indicates that I probably, and almost always, it looks like a forge world, Ross. It's a giant metallic-looking world. And so that is giving me one of these cool forge hammer, and there's a bunch of tokens in the game for these things. So I'm going to get a forge hammer token, and those are those tokens I can spend when I want to build something that requires the forge hammer. So it makes sense, right? I want to build a Titan. I have to have access to a forge world somewhere at some point to get the parts. So you can get forge hammer tokens. Other icons you will see is a little double cog icon, which makes building units cheaper. And the other token you will see is looks like a little flag token, and those are called reinforcements. And more about those in combat, but basically they give you free dudes in combat that are expendable.
Right.
So basically those three kinds. The other icon you will see will look like the little Imperial eagle logo inside the thing, and that means you can choose any of those three things I just mentioned: the hammer, the cog, or the flag. Right. So you want to Dominate because it's going to give you these really super cool resources that you can then spend usually for building things. The cogs reduce the cost of any unit you buy by 2 material, which is huge. The hammer has 2 different uses. It can be spent when you're building something complicated that requires the hammer, and you see it right there in the icon. Or you can spend the hammer to reduce the city requirement by 1. So if you need to build something that requires a command level of 2 cities, and you only have 1 city, you can spend the hammer to offset that. And the third thing, of course, is the little flag, which is basically a free unit in combat. More about that when combat comes. So the other reason you Dominate. So Dominate's actually really, really simple. You'll look on the table, you see you dominated every planet you got plastic on, you get the tokens from the box, put them on your map. The other thing about Dominate, though, is you also get to fire off your race power, your faction power, right, Craig?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So on each player map, there is a faction-specific power. Do you remember what the Space Marine faction-specific power was?
I do. The Space Marine faction-specific power was every time you dominate in a system, you can opt to spend 1 of your resource points to upgrade a scout to a Space Marine or to upgrade a Space Marine to a Land Raider.
Right. So Space Marines are really good at requisitioning parts. This is huge because it means he doesn't have to have the requirements to upgrade that plastic, and he doesn't have to pay nearly as much. So the cost of a Land Raider is very expensive, but 1 point to go from Space Marine to Land Raider or Scout to Space Marine is a really nice deal.
And you need at least 1 city to make a Space Marine, and I believe you need 2 cities to make a Land Raider. So it really helps out a lot, and it helps out a lot, especially if you do it in a smart way and a sort of a rolling strategy along your whole plan for the game. As you turn your early scouts that were free into Space Marines, which are much more powerful, and then start turning your Space Marines into Land Raiders, not requiring more cities.
Right.
It was a pretty big deal.
And this is a nice one because this really gives you a lot of the flavor of the factions there too. So the Orcs special ability is, for those who know about Orcs, you know that Orcs shoot spores everywhere, and they're generally pretty good at just growing more Orcs, but also they're good at bodging together vehicles out of whatever parts they have at hand. And so in this game, it manifests that when Orcs dominate a sector, we can build a unit. We pay the cost, but we can build it on a friendly planet in that system. So that lets me add a unit without doing a build order, right? Which is kind of huge. So think about it this way. The Orcs get effectively 4 build orders. You got your 2 factory orders, then you also got your 2 dominate orders, which could also be build, and all of a sudden you're popping out Orcs everywhere. So it's great. So you barely win a battle, right? And there's no or if there can be no factory in the system, which is also huge, right? So I barely win a battle. I got one little last Orc left I won. But I've got the resources to build a battle wagon. A battle wagon popped in. I bodged out of those dead Land Raider parts that were laying there, right? So it gives you that orky fluff, and it's like they don't have a factory. They don't need one. Orcs just show up everywhere. The Eldar one is very fluffy also. The Eldar one allows the Eldar to move any piece of plastic from a world in the active system to any other friendly world they control. Webway portals, right? And the Chaos guys, what happens with them is cultists pop up in adjacent systems.
Nice.
So basically, people are
fluffy.
People are going traitor nearby. So it's very fluffy, very cool, a nice little taste there. More of that sprinkled in the combat part of the game too. But I love this part, and it gives you a very strong reason to dominate quite a bit. Plus, if you're an Orc on a forge world, cranking out hammers and popping out more Orcs, that's just a great feeling. Last order, but certainly not least, is the advance order. So this is the move and essentially attack order in the game. The thing to remember about putting your advance order down, and this is the same mistake everybody used to make in StarCraft all the time, is you're putting this order in the system you're going to, not the system you're coming from. So you're putting this order in the system you are invading. What this means, of course, is you're telegraphing where you're going. And this is where I love this order stack thing, because Craig's like, aha, Russ, I'm going to invade your system. I'm like, well, crap. So on top of your invade order, I will now put a you don't know this, but I'm putting a deploy order so I can get more Orcs in the system. Or maybe I'm putting a dominate order to get more Orcs in the system and get some more resources before you take out that planet. And you're kind of delaying Craig even more. Well, Craig's like, well, aha, I'll put another attack order on top of that and get there before you. And I'm like, well, aha. But the problem with that plan is we're spending all of our orders in one system. Meanwhile, Ross is happily gallivanting across the universe, taking over all his objectives. So, so there's a really interesting.
Greed is best.
Is it really? Right, exactly. So the advanced order basically though is really pretty straightforward, but it's also a little bit complicated. I'm going to explain it. They have this thing with the way they did spaceships in this game. I think is really cool. So remember, I mentioned that there are 2 kinds of spaces on the board. There's voids, which is open space, and then there's worlds. Right. So when you move, what you're going to do when you do the advanced order and reveal it, you're going to be able to bring guys in from adjacent systems into wherever you reveal that order. Remember, you can't fly through warp storms. And by the rules, the first thing you do is you move spaceships. Now, spaceships don't require a path, so you can take a spaceship from an adjacent system and move it into any void in the system where you put the order, right? And you can move any number of your spaceships, but the rule is that to come from one system. So you can only ever move in to a new system from one single other system. You can't bring guys in from 3 adjacent systems or anything like that. So I bring in my spaceships. The thing about bringing your spaceships, and you want to think about a couple things. You want to have a path so your ground units can get to the world you want to get to them to. So what do I mean by that? So you have to be able to have a path in spaces of friendly controlled area to get from one planet to the other. So if I got a planet in my one system and I put an order in Craig's system to attack, and Craig's got a world in the back corner I really want to attack, I need to have spaceships in all the blank spaces so my ships, my world models can move friendly through all those spots and attack the other world.
Because you can't move through enemy territory.
You can't move through enemy territory, and you can't move through empty space with a world unit. You need to have a spaceship in the way there to make a kind of
it's like a bridge. The ship is. Yeah, okay.
Now, if worlds are adjacent, you can go right in. The fluff there is you're taking non-military transports to get across. So if it happens to be that 2 tiles are adjacent to each other where Craig's world is next to mine, it's just a different system, I can hop from my world right into Craig's world, no ships required. But if there's some voids there, I need to get there. What's really cool about this mechanic is it creates choke points in space, which is what results in the major fleet battles. So Dave was going to invade my system. He really wanted to get to a spot. To do this, he had to come through the one spaceship zone I controlled, And so I had a kill cruiser there. He had to bring in some pretty heavy chaos firepower to make sure that guy was going to die so his second attack order could get to the planet. Because the second part of this is you can only ever initiate one combat per move order. So it's possible to invade multiple, when you move into a system, to move into multiple sections there, as long as you're not creating multiple combats. So if there's a system with not a lot of guys in there and just a bunch of empty worlds, I can move in there and take over as much as I want. But if Ross has got a zone in space I need to get through and a world I want to get to, and I got to move my ship into Ross's occupied void first, I got to stop and finish that battle before I can move anybody past that spot or start any other battles in that system. So you can use space as a choke point and you get these really interesting space battles and these really interesting tactical and strategical spots you've got to make sure you control. Does that make sense?
And this is why the chaos ability to put ships through the warp storm would actually be really helpful.
Yes. Because you're setting it up for next turn. You're getting ready. You're getting that kill in there or whatever. One other thing that's interesting is, so you can start a battle either on a world or in space, but only one. One other interesting nuance is that after you do your movement, if you did not start a battle, you can choose to do an orbital bombardment. So, and how orbital bombardment works is that if you have a spaceship in a system that is adjacent to an enemy world in a system, you can just have your spaceship shoot the guys on the ground there just for fun, really. There's no risk to the spaceship, and you might get lucky and kill a guy. So, might as well do it.
Unless you have a bastion.
Yes. So bastions make orbital bombardments impossible.
That's right.
Although there are upgrade cards, I think the Marines have them for their battle barges that can get past that.
Yes, they do.
Because Marines are awesome at battle barge bombing, right? So there's all the cool fluff in there. Marines also have really cool upgrades for bastions and really cool stuff in combat, and Craig made most effective use of that. So there's some really cool fluff in here.
It didn't work.
The Eldar, I think, can do like double bombardment. I think there's a planet killer variant on the chaos side. So yeah, it's all in there someplace in the cards. But you don't even know all that for the basic rules. You just got to know that's how that works. So the trickiest bit is don't forget the paths. The paths I love. This is one of the parts I think that was always weak in StarCraft. There really wasn't any space battles, which was a good emulation of the board game. I mean, the video game, which really didn't have significant space battles either. But what's cool now in this game is space is a major part of it. And this also comes back to once you played the game once and sort of see that, when you're building the map, you will actually figure out ways to create space-based, void-based choke points so that you can think, if I put my fleet there, I can really control this whole system if I get there fast enough. You'll start to see that metagame build up, and it's the kind of game that really rewards multiple plays because of some of these nuances.
Now, would you say that this is more or less easy to understand than something like, I don't know, Imperium? What is that
Twilight
game?
Imperium?
Twilight Imperium,
yes, thank you.
Yes. So I would say it plays faster than Twilight Imperium, but that's not saying much. But I would also say it's much simpler than Twilight Imperium. I would say it's mechanically, and I want to be clear about this because Craig has some good points about it. I would say mechanically it is simpler than Twilight Imperium. It's also simpler than StarCraft. I would even go so far as to say I think it's simpler than Rune Wars.
Ooh,
okay? Because there's not a lot of other crazy stuff going on. The unit type builds are much smaller. I think the combat system's a little lighter. The unit building system, the big weakness in StarCraft, I'm going to do a little analysis now here, but the big weakness in StarCraft was unit building. It was really cool because you moved your little harvesters around and stuff to emulate the video game, but it really made it extremely fiddly and building took forever. Building in this game is just trivially fast. Once you get the hang of the whole hammer thing, it's like boom, done.
Yeah. Okay. It's not a barrier to the game.
Yeah, the most fiddly bit, it's not even that fiddly, is the combat system, which I'll get to in a second. And it's not that it's fiddly, it's just dramatic, and I think that's trying to emulate the fact that it's Warhammer 40,000, right? Combat's a huge thing. But no, I don't think it's particularly complicated. I think what Craig would say about it, and I want to speak for you, but I think one of the things that's fair to say about it is it's kind of like a Euro. It's not a Euro at all, but it's like that in that there are lots of things you're trying to do and lots of things to consider. And
you can't do them. You'll never be able to do everything you want to do.
Yes.
So it's an issue of depth versus complexity.
Yeah, I would say it's and that's what I think that's where it excels, and I'll talk about that more in the summary. But it's not complex. I mean, I'm sure it sounds, deep. But it's very, very deep, and there's so many different build options, and there's so many different things you can do. It's a little overwhelming, and can be one of those, spoiled for choice, but I can't do it all. So what do I do? Right. So that's, I think, really, really where it comes in. And when I describe combat, I think you're going to see more of those choices.
All right.
So let's get into that. So So, all right. So I've done my advance order. We've set up a combat situation. Maybe it's in space. Maybe it's on a world. The good news is the combat system's the same regardless. So it doesn't really matter. Let's fight, Ross. So here's what we're going to do.
In space, you can't fight back against me, though, right?
If I do an orbital bombardment, you can't fight back. But if we've got
That's
ship
what I'm
versus
saying.
ship, we're going to have a full-on battle.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
No, you're right. Orbital bombardment's special. So basically, here's how a full-on combat works. So if we both got plastic in the same system, we're going to fight. Here's how it works. So the very first thing we're to do is roll dice. This already makes it better than StarCraft because there's dice. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the icons on your player mat for all the pieces you have involved in the battle. And each of those pieces is going to have a blue icon with a number in it, and that's how many dice they throw. Okay? So the cooler the pieces, the more dice it throws, basically. Not always, though. Some of the guys are better at defense than they are at offense, but generally. So you're going to add up. So, Ross, if you've got, two, aspect warriors and two scouts or whatever, that's going to give you a total amount of dice. You're going to add them up, and you're going to roll all those dice. I'm going to do the same thing on my side, roll all my dice. There is a maximum dice pool of 8. You can never have more than 8 dice, period, just a rule.
Okay.
You don't hit that often, but you do hit it, once or twice through.
I saw it hit a lot.
All right, it happens once in a while.
Yeah.
But basically, you're going to roll those dice, and there's 3 different icons. There's bolters, there's shields with skulls in them. Those are basically shields, and there are eagles. You're going to divide your dice into 3 piles. Now, the interesting thing about this is there's going to be 3 rounds of combat, but you only roll the dice once at the beginning.
Okay.
So roll the dice once, divide them up. So let's say, Ross, you got 2 guns and 2 shields and an eagle, right? And I got something.
Okay.
I separate them out. Now, the next thing we're going to do is draw cards. So remember that little battle deck of cards that we started the game with that maybe we've upgraded, maybe we haven't.
Right.
We're each going to draw 5 of those cards, and we're going to look at them. And so now we've looked at the dice that were rolled on both sides. We've secretly looked at our hand of 5 cards, and now we can decide if we want to reinforce. So remember those tokens I talked about with flags on them? Mm-hmm. I can decide to add those flag tokens to the combat. If I do that, they count as basically my cheapest infantry model or my cheapest spaceship, depending if we're in space or on a world, right?
Do you roll dice for these guys again?
No. They're going to miss the dice roll. What they're there for is to soak damage and count as that troop type. More about that in a second. But the downside is if you play that token, win or lose, whether or not they die, it's going to be expended at the end of the battle. So you're deciding now if you need to spend that token now to have the extra presence on the board. The attacker decides to do that first, then the defender sees that the attacker does it, and he or she may also play that reinforced token if they want. You may not have any reinforced tokens. You might, depending on what you've done with Dominate, right? All right. Now it's time to do what's called execution. I love that word. So we're going to execute. So now, Ross, you and I are each going to secretly lock in one of our combat cards. Now, when we're looking at our combat cards, let's go through what we're choosing on our combat card. Okay? The number of guns I have on my current dice is how much damage I'm going to do to you, Ross. Mm-hmm. Okay? Minus the number of shields you have showing on your dice. Right. So if I got 3 guns showing and you got 2 shields showing, I'm going to get 1 point of damage through.
Right.
Each of my models on my stat sheet has a number of wounds on it. If the total damage I do to you exceeds the total wounds of a model, that plastic will be killed and off the board. If it's less than the total number of wounds you have, but it's still some amount of damage, that model will be routed and you have to turn it on its side. Okay?
You'd have to turn the plastic figure.
You turn the plastic figure on its side to show it's routed.
Okay.
Now, so what you're looking at right now then is, do I have more guns than he does? Do I have more shields? Now, the card I'm going to choose has several different icons on it. First, it's got some really cool art in the middle that doesn't matter, but it's really cool. On the left-hand side, there are a bunch of icons on the left-hand side of that card that match the icons on the dice. So you might see, for example, there's an orc card called Shooter Boys, and it's got 2 guns on the card. Mm-hmm. So by playing that card, it's effectively like adding 2 more gun dice to my pool. The thing to remember
the cards
is
give you more of the guns,
more
or
of the
shields,
icons.
or
Yes,
the
yes.
Okay.
And those top icons are always in play, regardless of the units I have in battle. Then there is some text on the card that might also come into play. And there's 2 rows of text. The first top row of text also always happens. So what happens to remember on the Shooter Boys, the roll of text says, re-roll any of your shield dice. So Shooter Boys are crazy. They don't care about themselves. They're just shooting like crazy. So the good news is I get 2 gun icons. The bad news is I got to re-roll any of my shields because I'm not as defensive, right? The counter of that, the orcs also have an Ard Boy card, which gives them 2 shields, and they got to re-roll any guns. Kind of cool, right? Then there's some text on the very bottom of the card that'll list a unit type. And if you have that unit type in the battle, you also get that extra ability.
Oh.
So you always get the icons, you always get the first line of text, and then there's some bonus ability that kicks in if that specific unit type happens to be in the battle.
Nice.
Okay? So the cards are always useful, but sometimes they're even more useful, right? So, Ross, you're going to lock in a card that you think is advantageous to you. I'm going to lock in a card advantageous to me. The attacker reveals his card first. I go, aha, look, I played Shooter Boys, Ross. I'm throwing 2 more guns at you. I got to reroll shields. I didn't roll any shields anyway, so I don't care. And my special ability, I forget what it is. Some of the abilities will add tokens of guns and tokens of shields to the battle, and that only counts for the first execution round. Okay? So we're going to show my card and do its thing. You're going to show your card, do its thing. And then we're going to compare the total guns I've got on my dice, on my cards, and any tokens that got added. We're going to subtract your total shields and see how much damage I'm doing to you. And then you've got to apply it to one unit at a time. You've got to apply it to unrouted units first. And if it wipes them out, it kills them. If there's extra damage, you got to take it on the next model of your choice. If there's not enough to kill something, you just turn it on its side, make it routed. All right?
Okay.
You then,
Very simple.
As a defender, do the same thing to me. How many guns do you do to me? I might have to route something. I might have to kill something. If both of us have plastic left, even if it's all routed, we're going to go on to the next execution round and repeat. So here's the neat thing. You leave the first card you played up. Now you're going to lock in a second card. The icons for those extra guns on the cards are on the left-hand side. You put the second card next to the first card when you flip it over. You keep the icons from this first card, and you add in the icons from the second card.
So the battle's escalating.
Yes. So I may have played Shooter Boys in the first round. I may play Shooter Boys again in the second round, and now my cards are adding 4 more guns total. Net, right? Or I might have played Ardboys. So now I've got a unit of Shooter Boys and a unit of Ardboys. So I've got extra shields and extra guns. Meanwhile, you're playing. I don't know, Craig. What is one of the ones you played with Bastions that did something? It did something really cool. I forget what it did.
One of the cards that had that triggered off the Bastion.
Yeah, it did something cool.
It killed somebody that I routed.
Yes, right.
It was huge.
Yep.
It was that's how I killed the Eldar Titan.
So routing cards is so what happens is something like a Titan which got 5 wounds. All you got to do is 1 wound to a Titan to rout it. But the problem with routing it is that's why you bring lots of extra fodder, right? So you don't rout the Titan. But the problem with that is you got to do 5 whole wounds to actually kill the Titan. And if I roll 2 guns and play 2 Shooter Boys, I'm doing 6 wounds, but the Titan's probably has rolled a couple shields, right? So I'm not actually going to kill him. I'm actually never going to kill him unless I get 5, but having an ability like that where you kill a routed unit is huge.
Now, we're going to do these different executions, but we're not going to re-roll the dice. That was the one time.
The dice are once. So
one-time event.
Yeah, one-time event. Then some of the cards do add extra dice, though. So some of the cards will actually say roll an extra die and add it to your pool.
Okay.
But the thing about those that's interesting is that if you're at your max 8 dice, you're still at max 8 dice. Now, what's also interesting is some of the cards will add tokens that add guns or shields, but the tokens expire after the one card is played, one execution round. So the tokens don't carry over from round to round. So then there's the third combat round. There's always 3 combat rounds, assuming if at any point someone's completely out of plastic, meaning it's all been blown out of the system, not routed, but blown out, then the battle ends and whoever's got plastic left is the winner.
You have tabled your opponent.
Yes. That doesn't exactly. If you have not tabled your opponent, even if you've routed him completely, you still keep playing cards until you've played 3 of these, and then you see who wins. And the guy who wins is the guy with the most eagles. So how do you get eagles? Well, there are 3 ways to get eagles. First, you might have rolled some on your dice, right? Second, some of the cards have them on the corner. So, for example, the orcs have an awesome card that I upgraded called Wog. I highly recommend all orc players replace your Gretchen with Wog cards as soon as you can. The Wog card does 2 really cool things. First, the text on it rallies a unit automatically. So, mob up, you get your orcs back, which is huge. Secondly, it adds 3 eagles on the side. Okay? And the player who wins the battle is the guy with the most eagles. Not the guy who's killed the most dudes. Not the guy with the most dudes left. Not the guy with the most unrouted models. It's the guy with the most eagles. But there's a third place to get eagles, and it's from unrouted models. So
that's the key.
Each of your models on your stat card actually has 3 stats. The first stat is the number of dice it rolls. We talked about that. The second stat is the number of wounds it has. We talked about that. And the third stat is the number of eagles it generates. So the Titan, I think, generates what? Depends on the faction, but I think they're 4 or something. So if the Titan's still standing at the end, he's throwing 4 eagles, right? But orc knobs throw 2 eagles. So if I'm attacking with 3 knobs and they're all still not routed at the end, that's throwing 6 eagles, right? So it really, But if you have a really bad, bloody battle of attrition and everybody's routed on both sides at the end, it's going to come down to the eagles you rolled in your dice and maybe that WOG card and a couple of the key things. So it's really interesting.
It's possible to lose the battle based on plastic, but still win
win the battle, right? But then it was really expensive because I might have lost betas on eagles, but killed more of your guys, and so you've got more to rebuild, right?
Right.
So then after you determine who the winner of the eagles are, the guy who wins stays where he is, and the loser must retreat. And the retreat rules are pretty straightforward. You can go back to where you attacked from as long as you've got a path. So as long as you've still got that path there, you can go back to a planet and get away. Anybody who retreats is automatically routed if they weren't before. And that's pretty much combat. Does it make sense?
Yep.
That's really it. That's really the whole game. Yep. And that's the whole thing. So the refresh phase is really simple. So after we've done all of our orders, done some attacking, done all that stuff, we refresh. In the refresh phase, it's really straightforward. All you're going to do is you collect your objective tokens first. Okay, so you look at all the worlds. If I've got guys on the world and my objective tokens there, I get to keep it and put it on my play mat, and it's mine forever. Then I collect materials, which means we're going to get all the worlds we control with plastic on them that have the green numbers on them. We're going to up our dials by that number. Then we're going to rally units. So we're going to stand up all knock down dudes. And then we're going to move the warp storms and resolve the event cards. So remember when we were resolving orders, if we decided not to do the order or if we played a strategic order, we put it on top of our event card deck. Well, for every token on top of that event card deck, I get to draw an event card. And of the cards I draw, I get to pick one and do what it says on the card. And these cards are A, faction specific, and B, awesomely powerful. So one of them, for example, from the orcs is Albigedia. And it basically allows us to take one orc unit and put it in any unoccupied planet in the system, on the board. All right, because they fired off a warp boy or they had mech boys or something or whatever. By the way, Ross, I love this. One of the combat cards for the orcs is mech boys, and it's got the giant shock attack cannon on it.
Nice.
And when you play the card, your opponent draws a random card from his deck, and you get the icons from the side of it, which is just awesome. It's very,
awesome.
very orky.
The Eldar have a card that do the not the Exarch, the
Autarch?
the Autarch card allows you to pull an extra card from your deck and use that and add those icons for the rest of the battle.
Woo.
Yeah.
The mech boy allows you to use it for that one phase of the battle, but the Autarch is friggin'
Leave it to Eldar. But what's interesting about that, Ross, is remember that collecting the objectives is before resolving the event card. So even though I now just teleported my orcs to an objective on the other side of the board, I got to wait the whole next turn to actually collect that objective.
Right.
So now the whole board's got a chance to jump in there and stop me.
And that's good because you want someone to be able to react to that.
Exactly right. They do a good job of making sure there's time to react. So also as part of this phase, as resolving these really cool cards, we also are going to move the warp storms. And when it's your turn to resolve a card, on those cards you resolve, there's also a little icon that shows different movement options for the warp storms. And you're going to pick a warp storm, and you're going to move it one of the ways indicated on your card. Sometimes it's straight across the system it's in. Sometimes it's to the right or left. You get to, as long as you're picking a path that's indicated on your card, you can do that.
So each player gets to do this.
Yes, and once you move a warp storm, you flip it over so no one else can move it that turn. So each warp storm is going to move once and only once. And once someone moves a warp storm, so by being first player, you're going to get the first dibs on moving which warp storm is going to move and where it's going to go. And being second player, you're going to be able to lock down also which warp storms they can't move and you're trying now to screw your opponent. So maybe you've made a desperate gambit and you've gotten to a system and you barely conquered it. And Ross, you've got a whole counterattacking fleet ready to go, and I move the warp storm in your way. And you're like, oh! So that kind of stuff. Or you can try to move a warp storm way out of the way. So it can be out of it. You got a long campaign coming. You really want the warp storms far away so they're not going to mess you up. So that's a really neat mechanic that I think, Craig, you're exactly right. It really makes the game very interesting to that. And that's really it. And then we move the first player round token to the next player, and we move the round counter up one on the thing, and we repeat the whole thing. And that, in a nutshell, is that.
In a very large nutshell.
Yes.
A Forbidden Stars nutshell.
Yeah, we talked about all the structures. We talked about the different event cards. Craig, can you think of any other good event card examples? I only gave the one Orky one.
No, I only got one, and it was the only one I got the whole game was it was a scheme. Mm-hmm. So you get one at a time. So it's in front of you until you use it. And mine was use this if you're or if you have a unit routed at the end of an execution phase and you can rally that unit.
Right.
Which would have been cool. I thought when I had one point, I had a Land Raider and a Bastion, and it was assaulted by an Eldar Titan, and there were 4 units. An Eldar Titan, I think 2 Wraith Guard, and an Aspect Warriors.
Yes.
With an additional Aspect Warrior because he brought in reinforcements.
Yeah.
And so
the odds were not in your favor. They were not.
No, they were not.
Favor.
But I did really well.
You did actually do really well.
I brought them down to the Titan and one other unit. I killed everything else. But then I finessed it as much as I could. So
this is when you were defeating them when they were routed.
Right.
Yes, I had one card. Yeah, it allowed me to do that once.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was
So
the strategize order was something that I never felt I could justify, except once. I did it once, and that's how I got that scheme card. Because I was always you only have 4 orders to give, and you definitely want to dominate as a Marine, so you're generating those bigger, tougher units, and you want to move your stuff around, and you want to build your units, and so I only strategized once. So I felt like I was falling behind in that arms race because everybody else's combat decks were getting better, and I felt that everybody was getting better of those strategy cards that were coming out that you were buying. I had one, and I almost used it, that one that allows bastions to work as factories.
Right.
Sadly, I was not able to pull that off because the Eldar hit me right after I built the bastion.
Cheeky gits.
Cheeky Eldar balls.
All right. So yeah, but that gives you hopefully a good taste for the game. And we should give our final thoughts here. But Craig, before we do that, in the style of an Evil Sun's war boss, please describe the patent pending D6G rating system.
Right, lads, listen up. I'm talking to you here on this big platform on top of the Gargant. I want you to look at the horizon. Notice that big walking Titan thing? That's really cool. We need one of those. We want it. It's good. We're going to say it's a 2+. So big and good and tough is better. It's a low number. See the weedy git over on the end of the line there? The scout, they call them. I calls them lunch. That there we're going to call a 6. So the weedier, the smaller, the more pathetic humies, they're a 6. Good, low number. Bad, high number. And because we Zorks, we don't cares about no math. So we says re-rolls instead of half.
Nice. Well done, War Boss Gallant.
That may be your best one yet.
Yeah, the end there rhymed.
It did. That was pretty good.
And in my defense, Russ does not tell me what he's going to throw at me before.
No, I do not.
It's right there. I didn't see it, though. No, you just wrote that in.
I did.
That was not there. See? You may messing with my head.
All right. So, Craig, you want to go first? Give us your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go first. There's so much depth here. My brain was hurting. It's an FFG game now, so you're going to have multiple decks of cards. You need to know your decks of cards. You need to know your initial 10 combat cards, or the 5 in sets of 2. You need to know the deck of combat cards that you're going to be upgrading to, so you know which ones you want. I don't know how situational they are. I think you're probably going to have your favorites, and you're probably going to want to filter in your favorites as early as possible in the game. You're also going to need to know those upgrade cards. You're going to need to know your scheme cards, so you kind of know what you're going for. You also kind of have to know everybody else's cards. So I think this is a definite direction for FFG, where these cards are so integral and there's so many different decks. You need to know the cards.
Well,
so,
this is Corey Kineska is involved, so
yes,
which is miraculously there are no tiny cards, but a grown-up with grown-up hands made this one, but or had a hand in it.
Oh my goodness!
2 drums and a cymbal fall off a building. Okay, anyway. So there's a lot going on, and going into it, I think you need to invest some time to really get good at this game, and it needs to kind of hook you in right from the beginning. because you're learning it. I think doing your first mission as that learning game is probably a great idea. Throwing into the deep end in a 4-player game right off the bat as your first game might not be the best idea. I felt kind of overwhelmed. I didn't know what to expect from other people's cards. I didn't know what I could expect from my own cards. The game itself is relatively simple. It's very straightforward. I think the game is extremely well designed and well written. It's just that the interplay of all those different cards is really where it shines. And for you to appreciate it and get the most out of it, you need to know all that. So that being said, I did get very frustrated. Any of these types of games, like StarCraft and any of them, I get frustrated because what happens is I take a mental snapshot of the board at the beginning of the game, and then I plan everything out based on that snapshot, totally not noticing where other people are deploying and moving. So I don't notice that the Eldar's building up on my border. All I notice is, it would be really cool if I had a little empire over in that corner. And so I'm doing that, and the next thing you know, the Eldar comes in with a flippin' Titan and crushes my little guy who I thought was, I got a Land Raider over there. He's fine. Then I see these cards. I'm taking Fire Dragons after you. Now it's Howling Banshees. And you're just like, oh my God. And if you don't know your cards and what your force can do, then it's going to feel kind of like you're flat-footed, which is what sort of happened to me. But that was me. That was not the game. I would say I'm going to give this game a 3+ with a reroll.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Okay, nice. For the type of game that it is. I'm going to say 3+. I'm going to say 3+. I'm going to say +1 if you are an aficionado of the 40K universe, and a +1 onto that into a reroll if you enjoy these kinds of strategic overview board games where you're it's not a 4X though, Russ, right?
No,
you're not exploring. You know where everything is.
Yeah, you know where everything is. There's no
except
explore.
You even know where you know where everything is. You know where your objectives are. There's no it might be a little 4X-y if the objectives were varying victory point values, but they're not. They're just you're just looking for 4 tokens. You see where the tokens are. But other than that, you're building your forces, you're regulating your economy, you're doing all this other stuff. So if you like that kind of a game, then it's an additional plus. So if you like that kind of game and you like 40K, this is a 2+ with a reroll for you enjoying it. It is so well executed. The fluff is just the game is saturated with fluff. The way that each of the forces works it seemed balanced to me, but even more to me, to my point, was very fluffy and cool and I just think it's an extremely well designed and executed game.
Cool. That's a very
I'm putting it out there. It's
rating,
bold.
Craig. Nice. It is bold. Okay. So first of all, I love the fluff in this game. So I love the 40K universe, and I love the execution here. I also love all the components. So it was just a no-brainer. I had to order it the day it released. I had to have it. But it also combines all my favorites. So I've been a fan since I very first played the very first Game of Thrones game where it came out in 2002 or whatever it was, way back in the day. I loved the order system. And I fell in love with StarCraft because it did that order system and then did the stacking. Plus, it's in a universe that's kind of like 40K. I mean, StarCraft is unabashedly, borrows from the 40K universe heavily. So I love that too. But the parts of the StarCraft that I found hard to get players to play, meaning how you build units and some of the complexity around the way you build the card decks and things, made it not for everyone. So I have a very small group of folks that I play with once every 6 months, StarCraft. This, though, fixes all that. So it kind of evolves a lot of the mechanics. And we even had a couple of our gamers. This is becoming a very big hit in our local group. And one of the guys, I think Adam said it, he said this might be the pinnacle of the Fantasy Flight, dominate the map board game. I really like it a lot. I think it's fantastic. I think it transcends the fact it's 40K. I think even if you don't like 40K, it's worth a try because the mechanics are so cool if you like conquer the map kind of games. Yeah. And if you like 40K, it's a no-brainer. So I agree very strongly with your rating, Craig, that I think it's a 3+, and then it's a +1 if you're a 40K fan or +1 if you're a fan of StarCraft. If you're a fan of StarCraft, this is a must-buy. It's a 1+ with a reroll.
This is, in my opinion, StarCraft. I played it a couple times. I enjoyed it, but I was one of those guys that wouldn't play it again.
Yep.
and I thought this was far superior in every way.
Yes, agreed. And I love StarCraft. I still have my game. I still love it, but it's going to be hard for me to justify playing StarCraft with this in existence. The only downside this has right now against StarCraft is StarCraft supported 6 players out of the giant coffin box.
Right.
This supports 4, but please, everybody go buy this game so that Fantasy Flight will make a 2-player expansion, which is Imperial Guard and Tyranids. How awesome would that be? That would
Or
be
Tau.
perfect. Or Tau. Or Tau.
Nobody loves Tau.
Well, no, I like Tau.
Well, Russ is too old school.
I have Tau. I own Tau, but I'm just saying.
Russ forgets when Tyranids were the new race.
No, I think people would like Necrons too, but I think Tyranids and Guard are so intrinsic to the universe they got to be there first. That's my opinion personally. But,
Okay.
I mean, you probably get it without Guard, but I like Guard. So anyway,
No, you need Guard.
yeah, any two factions would do it.
Except that they're not Guard anymore. You can't copyright Guard.
I can't pronounce what they are anymore.
Astra Militarum.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ross.
see? Why would you not just go directly to Ross for that?
You're right. The other thing about this I really like is the asymmetry is fantastic. So, and they capture it in so many places. So it's obvious in the Dominate order, right, where everybody's got their faction ability, but it's there in the combat cards. It's there in the. Oh, and by the way, Craig, that's
Yes.
why they're banners, because by making them banners, when one card is plays and they're Slugga Boys, the next card, one card they're Terminators, the next card they're, you know what I mean? Like they can be different kinds of guys. I think the banner represents a division with different units in it, kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, that's my theory.
Not as a Marine, though. As a Marine, they just count as scouts.
All right, fair enough. But in any case, I think it's really, really awesome. Oh, one of the cards you play too, Craig, right?
But you're right, actually, because it's Aspect Warriors for the Eldar.
And then sometimes.
So it is. It's just because it's just cultists for. So for Chaos and Marines, it's not so much. No, because for cultists, it's different Chaos powers.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's just really the scouts.
Well, you could have an expansion where the scouts are like the specials, like the sniper scouts or the close up scouts or the biker scouts.
They do have
the land speeder scouts now.
The elite scouts.
Well, your scouts too, I think, were cool because they were doing different cool tactics. So you had one card that was like ambush,
right?
Which if you were attacking and you had scouts, they got like an early kill or something, right? It was pretty cool.
They had reconnaissance, which I get to look at your card before I play mine.
So there was cool stuff like that where your units it matched the fluff. Your unit type didn't change; they were just doing different tactics, which is kind of neat.
And that's what I'm saying is it's really you need to know these cards.
Yeah, you do. But I think what's cool about it, I was talking to another player, and I lost badly in our last game, and I came in dead last. But I still had a great time. I was talking to another guy who just bought the game himself, and he's not really a hardcore gamer, and he was like, I just like playing the game for the story that unfolds and watching what happens. So you're right, Craig. To play this game and have a good shot at winning, you got to know all that stuff. But the first time, just go in and just be prepared to watch what unfolds and see what happens and see what you can do and not worry about winning. And I think that's the way to start it. And then from there, see if you like what happens, and then see if you want to really learn the game to be more of a competitive player. If that's where you like to go. So Ross, so what do you think of that, Ross? What do you think you've heard, and what do you think you'd rate this thing? Your desire to play it?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I love 40K like very few people love 40K. So this game had me, right away with the fantastic miniatures, the playing pieces, and it has the fantastic set design and stuff like that. You were talking about how it looks like old Rogue Tradery. It's definitely a love letter to that aesthetic, that old Rogue Trader aesthetic. So it's so 40K. The fluff and the art and the pieces that, I mean, I was already just like, yes. But beyond that, I tend to be a pretty laid back, casual board game guy. Like I look at stuff like Twilight Imperium and I get a little intimidated, right? That looks like an awful lot of board setup and it looks like an awful lot of complexity and it looks like an awful lot of time to learn. But this game, we were going through and I was asking the questions and I said, okay, so the setup, while it may look complex, is actually part of the game. You're making choices in setup that affect what the game is like. And then we talked about the difference between depth and complexity. And it's like, well, it's got a lot of depth to it, but it isn't super complex. I was able to grasp the basics just by listening to Russ and looking at the pictures. But there are so many, as you say, options and interesting things to do with it. So it is a game that appeals to me as a casual board game guy. That I am certain that I could get into this and play it and not feel like I had to spend an awful lot of time setting it up or learning the rules or teaching other people the rules. So there's a lot of things that make me want to play this pretty bad. I'm going to say for me and for people like me, I would say at a minimum it's a 3+ with a reroll. And I would have to agree ultimately with, I think, Craig and Russ, both of you gave it the same rating. The +1s for if you like StarCraft and if you like 40K, just make it an automatic buy.
Yep. Agreed. Well, there you have it. There is Forbidden Stars. Ross, thank you so much for joining us on this.
Always a blast
this
having you
megasode
on.
here. Always
Well,
great to
thank
have
you guys. May the Emperor be with you.
Thank you.
And also with you. Oh, wait.
You beat me. I was going to say the same thing. So Ross, if people want to follow what you're up to, all the wackiness that you do, where is the best places to go on the intertubes to find out more about Ross Watson?
Well, I have my personal website at therosswatson.com. It's badly in need of an update, but I will get to that very soon, I promise. And you can also find out about my company, Evil Beagle Games, at evilbeaglegames.com. And if you want to keep an eye on the newest things for Savage Rifts, which is going to be my next big project, check out, I believe it is Pinnacle. Let me just double check this really quick. Pinnacle Entertainment Group, which is PEGINC, peginc.com.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Ross, and we will have to have you on again in the not-too-distant future. We cannot make it be this long again next time.
That's right.
I would like that. I would love to come back. You guys know that anytime.
Awesome. Always welcome.
Awesome.
Take care, Ross.
Take
See
care.
you later, Ross. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This edition of Did You Ever Notice is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon, the guys and gals that make it possible for us to do this and take hours out of every week away from our friends and family to bring you this thing that for whatever reason you're willing to listen to. This week I would like to thank Jeff Lane, Christopher Meyer, Andre Fodstad, Angus Mackey, probably Mackey, and Joe Chalewa, probably Chalewa. Thanks, guys, and thank all of you over at have gone over to Patreon and have helped us out. And if you haven't gone over yet, go at least look at the video. You can laugh, you can cry. It's worthy of either, really, depending upon your mindset. And if it's willing, if it's something you're willing to toss in a little tip, the tip jar, then thank you very, very much for helping us keep this thing going. Did you ever notice how everything is relative? More to the point, do you ever notice how often I'm talking about everything being relative? I think I've noticed that after a while. A lot of these Did You Ever Notice segments tend to be about relativity. But really, this time around, I'm bringing it out of the realm of gaming and into the real world, so to speak. About 6 months ago, my wife asked me if we could take part in this program called the Fresh Air Fund. I had never heard of it before, but apparently it's huge, and it's been around since the late 1800s. And the more I talk about it, the more people say, oh, yeah, the Fresh Air Fund, I know what that is. So in case you don't know what the Fresh Air Fund is, the Fresh Air Fund is an organization that's been around, like I said, since the late 1800s, and it matches up disadvantaged inner-city kids with families that live out in the suburbs/countryside so that they can go and sort of experience what life's like away from the city for, depends anywhere from a week to 10 days. And I was a little intimidated when my wife asked if we could do that, bringing a kid that you don't know into your house with your son. How do you know how they're going to interact? I'm a nervous Nelly, kinda, to be honest. And so when she suggested it, I could think of a million things that might have gone wrong, but I could also think of a million things that could be awesome about it. And a million advantages that my son Reese could draw from it if things went well. And so I hesitantly said yes. And we did eventually. Turned out we had a little 8-year-old boy come up and stay with us for 10 days in the middle of August. So it's a good thing that Gen Con got moved, actually. And it was phenomenal. It was fantastic. And so we opened our home to this little guy, and he came. We had a room all set for him, and we knew that he liked Spider-Man, so we had a little Spider-Man comforter for him on the bed in the spare bedroom. And he came in. We had already talked to his mom a lot. My wife in particular had talked to his mom a lot. So that communication was really important. And when he came, he was very shy. I don't know if I could ever, he was a little 8-year-old boy. I don't know even if Reese was 8, if I could let him go and give him to, to strangers for 10 days. Although they do all kinds of background checks, and I'm sure there's a lot of, the vetting process took about 3 months. So I'm sure it was deep. But I still don't know if I would have mellowed it. But this little guy, he came to our house and we had all kinds of plans. We wanted to do all kinds of, country-ish things. We went up to Lake Winnipesaukee where my parents have a boat, and he went on the boat twice. He loved it. My in-laws have a pool. My parents have a pool, but they weren't near there. My in-laws have a pool. He went over there a bunch of times. We wanted to go hiking. Immediately you got a really interesting view of like what it must be like to grow up in the inner city, because he was like, okay, I'm in the country. Where are the deer? Where's the bear? I want to see the bears and the deers. And we were like, occasionally a deer will walk through our yard, and longtime listeners know that a bear did walk through my yard once, but that's not common. And so Karen immediately started going through and found a zoo, like 2 hours away in Massachusetts that has a giant deer forest that you can go in. So we did that. We were going nuts the whole time he was there, because we really wanted to give him this experience, and it was amazing. And he was awesome. We're still in contact with him. The Fresh Air Fund gives you the option of sort of continuing your relationship with the child that came to you, or you can choose a new child. There's all kinds of ways you can go, but we knew immediately he was so great with Reese. He was like having a little guy that was around that was like a big brother to Reese, and Reese loved him, and it was just amazing. I can't tell you how much it meant to our family and how great it was, especially with Reese being an only child. It was just amazing. And so we did all kinds of stuff, like I said. And one of the things that we did was we went camping, which if you follow me on Twitter, you saw the tent, which was very impressive. I think that I managed to put that up. We've never gone camping as a family. I used to go camping all the time with my family. I didn't particularly care for it. Karen has this sort of romanticized idea of camping, and she's gone a couple times with friends, but she's never gone like with all of us. And so we went camping, we went fishing, we went hiking, we went mountain climbing, not really mountain climbing, but you get the point. We did all this stuff, and slowly over the course of the week, I started to realize like Reese was having a blast, and Reese is just a great kid. He's not spoiled. He never whines and begs for stuff usually, but no more than a normal kid. But I realized we were doing a bunch of stuff that he's always wanted to do, and we never got around to doing. Like he wanted to go camping, we never got around to it. He wanted to go fishing for 2 summers, and I don't like fishing. So, but having the little boy from Brooklyn come up, all of a sudden it infused us with this energy that we wanted to do all this stuff, which might not say great things about us as parents because we weren't doing it for our kid. But we do plenty. Please believe me. Now I think you're thinking I'm a bad parent. Anyway. But it was awesome because now Reese was not only was Reese having this amazing experience, but we were also having like doing all these things that he's always wanted to do that we just didn't, it just didn't come up because we were forcing ourselves to do so much in that 10-day period. When we had to bring him to the bus area to go home, it was really, it was really emotional for all of us. It was like a movie. He got a window seat so he could wave to us as the bus drove away. We've been in contact with him since. He and Reese text back and forth on their mom's phones. It was great. So I guess I can't imagine a lot of charity is awesome, of course. I can't imagine a charity with a more immediate return than something where you get to see the experience and feel what this little guy is feeling and watch him. And it helped. I'm not going to lie. It helped that he was so appreciative, that he was so polite and just nice to my son. But at the same time, even when they're kids with more challenges, that I have friends who did it, and they enjoyed it, and they like just watching these kids and seeing them and seeing their faces was amazing. But I think there was another lesson learned that week also, which is like to make the most of what is around you. Like we should have gone camping. The little boy hated camping. He was like, this is too much nature. In fact, when we got to the campsite, which was deep in a giant state park, he was like, we're sleeping here? Okay, I'm walking back to New York City. And he just started walking down the road. He was a very funny boy. But Reese loved it. It was everything Reese ever wanted. Like, it was the exact experience. So we're going to do that again. Probably not this year because now the summer's over and school's already started. But we're going to do this for sure next year. And not with not with the little boy because he didn't enjoy it. But just... Reese, he got to fish. None of us were any good at fishing, so I don't think any fish were in danger that day. But he got to throw the line into the water and reel it in a couple times before his daddy tangled it all up. So it's how important it is to take advantage of the things around you. Make sure that you make the time to do these cool things and just experience life. And remember, there's so many people out there that doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum, there's a lot of people out there who have less than you, and helping them in any way is important, I think, especially now in this historical period that we're living in. But when you can help a person and see the immediate return on their faces, it's just unbelievable. Words cannot describe how it felt. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Maybe if even one or two people hear my voice and they're intrigued and they look into it, then that's one or two more kids that are going to get a chance to experience something great. And that's about it. So I guess that's all I've got to say about that. So thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
Craig, can I get some levels from you, sir?
You can get as many levels as I have to give, Russ. They're all yours.
Your levels all look great, sir.
Okay, good.
Craig, would you say you've ran out of levels to give?
I have no more levels to give.
I have all the levels.